Oh, okay.
Okay, welcome everybody. I want to call to order the March 9th, 2021 meeting of the Yarmouth Board of Selectmen. And before we begin, I need to read into the record this order regarding pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12th, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law, General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 18, and the Governor's March 23rd, 2020 order imposing strict limitations on the number of people that may gather in one place. This meeting of the Yarmouth Board of Selectmen is being conducted via remote participation. All votes during this meeting will need to be conducted by roll call. No in-person attendance will be permitted, but every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access and participate in the proceedings as provided for in the order. Public participation will be permitted by allowing members of the public to join this meeting via Zoom or via telephone, and comments can also be sent in by email to publiccomment@yarmouth.ma.us. And I will now take a roll call vote to enter in a meeting quorum. Tracy Post.
Aye.
Mr. Tolley.
Aye.
Michael Stone.
Aye.
And Dan Horgan.
Aye.
Very good. So the first order of business is to join in a pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, with liberty and justice for all.
Mark, can I ask a question? Just a
Sure.
point of order. Typically on the top left, it does say we're live on YouTube, but usually it says it's recording. I don't know if we need to
Okay.
do that to make sure that it's recording.
So,
There it goes. Never mind. All set.
good call. I'm sure there was that was helpful, Tracy. Thank you. So the first item of business is public comments, and I just want to state that the open meeting law discourages public bodies from discussing topics not listed on the agenda. So the public should therefore not really expect the board to respond to questions or statements made during the public comment portion of the meeting. So I'm going to ask Kyle to begin this portion of our agenda.
Yeah, our first note is we have a note that came in via email from Robert Ciavara at 23 New Hampshire Avenue in West Yarmouth. This was dated February 23rd, so it was intended to be sent ahead of last meeting, but I'll just read it tonight. Later, there will be discussion on what capital items to be deferred, services to cut, or reserves we will need to raid to balance this year's budget. The CPA tax is a 20-year-old idea that simply does not address the largest needs of the town anymore. Those needs are 1, the several buildings we need to replace, 2, the wastewater system, 3, and the coastal infrastructure needs are the new financial challenges to the town. Consider the state match, ? Has declined from 30% to approximately 10%. Clearly, the incentive is not the same. The town cannot continue to buy things like splash pads when residents are paying 90% out of their pocket, while there is a need to cut or defer services, reserves, and capital needs. For that purchase, we need to add operating costs, liability, and maintenance. We will have to increase budgets to service the capital purchase. We really don't do a great job taking care of what we already own. So we will cut food pantry line items, but increase recreation for a splash pad. We are now even spending Yarmouth CPA tax dollars in other towns. The town of Yarmouth needs for approximately $300 million to $500 million is fast approaching. It is my understanding that our S&P rating has already been downgraded due to the expected debt this town is acquiring. This whole issue is exacerbated by the lack of commercial real estate tax base. We have managed to drive out nearly 2/3 of all businesses out of our town. We are approximately 18% and are now close to 5% of total receipts. The fact is, commercial taxes help the residents maintain a less volatile and lower tax rate for the town. We must build that base and support businesses that show interest in investing in Yarmouth. Again, I ask is building a splash pad when a private company just invested a substantial amount of money into a tax generating tourist attraction around water activities right on Route 28. Hopefully, the board will use the above information to take actions on these and other tax relief ideas that will be presented tonight that don't raid accounts, defer capital, or cut services. Best regards, Robert C. Ibarra.
Thank you, Kyle. Do we have any other email comments that need to be read into the record?
We don't, but we do have a Miss Morris who's raising her hand.
Okay. We can recognize.
Hello, this is Vida. Um, I'm going to speak on my favorite topic, and I see you have it in the individual items for discussion. I just want to go over, what I've said before. The town of Dennis, once there was brought to their attention that they needed to come on board if they wanted Wixom to be in the project. From that day on, they adopted a mantra of "we'll pay our fair share," and continued on with this mantra for months, or actually a year or more, until the events overtook them. I mean, the signing of the settlement agreement and the town meeting approvals and election approvals of the newly adopted 35-65 split on anything having to do with the school building. And they were still continuing to with this mantra. And I'm not sure exactly, I guess Ed will explain why the entire bill was sent to Yarmouth. And then he took it upon himself from the superintendent, why he took it upon himself then to issue a bill to Dennis. It probably would have been much better if the superintendent had been asked to handle it on her end from beginning to end. But to be that as it may, we are where we are. And I think at this point, again, I think you need to try to put it back in her lap and have her deal with Dennis on this matter. It is, I don't understand why we're having this whole situation at the point where it is right now. But that's what I wanted to say pretty much on that. As a matter of fact, I think anybody who, nobody can claim that they never heard about this matter previously. If you were to go back to and view the September 15th video of one of your meetings in 2020, September 15, 20, you will find that Mike spoke very eloquently about this matter and especially on the part where we would be engaging with Dennis again in the wastewater project. And I was under the impression that there would be some serious thought would be given about continuing in that project. But then when the vote came later on in the year or the beginning of this year, everybody voted, yeah, let's continue with Dennis. And not only do we have a problem with Dennis, there's a problem with the consultant on that project. And he, I just found out that I think it was Chatham. There was a meeting there on this, the wastewater matter. And somebody apparently was floating the statistic that 800,000, I guess, pounds of fertilizer had been sold on Cape Cod. And there was a representative from the Scott Company who rose up and said, well, I would like to know who provided it, because we happen to sell the largest amount of it, by far the largest amount of the fertilizer, and we only sold 100,000 of that. So you need to start looking at some of the statistics that are being provided by this, especially this consultant, because he was found out 10 years ago that he was being very loose, fast and loose with his statistics, and it helped in turning the people against the whole project. So I'm hoping that anyway, that this will come up. I don't know if you will allow me to say anything when you take this discussion up, in case something has occurred to me in the meantime. But that's what I have to say about it.
Thank you for your public comment. Kyle, do we have anybody else seeking recognition for public?
Yeah, we
comment?
have Kurt. I believe it's Mr. Kurt Sears
Okay.
raising his hand.
Mr. Sears.
I have a couple more of those. Does anybody remember
And
questions?
just for the record, it's Kurt Sears from.
Yeah, from Yarmouthport.
Thank you.
When the when Department of Natural Resources moved from Forest Road to Route 28, there was a bulletin board there which posted open shellfish seasons and locations and whatnot. And I noticed in the past few weeks that board's disappeared. So I'm just curious about why that happened, because my memory tells me that we had, as the Board of Selectmen, had asked for that to stay there and be maintained so that the people who went to the dump could just, swing by there and look at that and see what was happening on the DNR side of things. So I'd like to know why that went away. And the other one, which I believe I know the answer to, is there used to be a salt and sand pile on Buck Island Road for the residents, but I believe it might have gone away because the commercial people were abusing it. I don't know if anybody remembers that or not, but it would be nice if we could find a way. Of course, the season's almost over too, but I think it'd be nice to find a way to provide that service again. Maybe, looking into next winter.
Okay, thank you.
All right, that's it for today.
Thank you very much.
Mark,
Yes.
as part of an email that we received, I think just today from Phil in the health department, there was a notice there that the signboard at the landfill was being repaired. So I don't know if that's the same one that Kurt's discussing, but perhaps it's just being fixed.
Well, we can check on that. We'll do that with our town administrator. Anybody else, Kyle, that needs seeking recognition?
No one else is seeking recognition.
Okay, very good. So the next item on the agenda is the COVID-19 update for Yarmouth. We have the health director here. Can we bring him up? Okay, Mr. Murphy.
Good evening. The signboard at the landfill, that's the COVID signboard that we have up, letting people know when they go in the number of cases. It's different than the shellfish signboard. Okay, an update, Kyle. We're all set to show a few slides. Okay. Thank you. You can see we're on the back side of the number pandemic, COVID coronavirus pandemic. It's coming down, which is great news. It's been a year. We started March 11th. We're almost a year. Even though it's coming down, we're higher than when it started in March and April. Thank you. So we're a year into it. Our first case, as you can see, was March 11th with a 28-year-old male. Our thousandth case was, February 5th with a 30-year-old female. So we can scroll down a little bit. And as of today, we're at 1,148 cases. A year later, you skipped over it, Kyle. And we've had 31 deaths in the first year. So that's what we look at over the first year. The cases, as I mentioned, 1,148, we're 39 active. We were a little lower, but it seems to have come up in the last week. So that's where we're falling right now. Over 1,100 have been discontinued. Okay, good. Still community spread around town that I update this each time before the board based on population also. Thank you. By age group, again, that we see the 50 to 59 has the highest group. Then after that, between 20 and 70 is pretty well divided between the number of people getting COVID. Interesting, if you can just scroll down just a little bit, Kyle, from that was from Friday, last Friday to today over the weekend. We're almost up. We had a couple more come in after this came up. So we've almost had 50 cases since Friday come into us that we've been following. And that's working on over the weekend. Phil Renault that does our work will check in and also check in with the school nurse on a couple cases of students and even students that are remote learning. We've had to track and work with those families along with the contact tracing. Thank you. As the Friday, the state comes out with a list of status of where all the towns sit. It's good to see all the Cape towns out of the red high risk category. With Yarmouth, we're now back in the continuing back in the yellow for the 5th consecutive week with our positivity rate decreasing. And we're also having less total tests over the last 2 weeks. We're down to 1,800. We were almost up to about 3,000 tests, and that's mainly due to the nursing homes are not testing all 2 or 3 times a week because they've all been vaccinated, their patients and most of their staffing. So it's a good trend as we see coming, and we hope that continues. Hospitalizations, as of yesterday, Cape Cod Hospital had 11 beds and 5 in ICU, along with Falmouth Hospital. So it's been about consistent the last 2 weeks, which seems to be going down from earlier in February. So we're not straining the hospital system. Okay. Deaths, I think we had 1 since the last time I made the presentation to you. And as a matter of fact, age came down. It was a person that was age 67. So our average age went down from age 86 to 85. Thank you. I know I put precautions up every time, but I just can't stress it enough because it's so frustrating when we're doing our contact tracing and we find people are still gathering. And we just need to continue stressing that. Avoid social gatherings, know who you're with, know who's in your bubble, and keep the mask up and social distance. Thank you. Okay, now for an update on the vaccine, I'd like to bring in Diane Kane. I think she's here from the director of Senior Center. If we can bring her in.
Here. Diane?
Yeah, so we have vaccination plans. We are dependent on state vaccine allotment, so we don't really know what we're going to get from week to week. So we're basing our plans on what we can get. So we have been able to vaccinate so far 60 people through Harbor Health. And that was on the first week. We had taken the bus, motor coach bus over there to into Hyannis to Harbor Health. And last week we had people just plain out driving to Harbor Health. They've been very receptive to us, and they're very well organized place. So we have one Cape vaccination site, which is new. It's at the Cape Cod Community College. It's a large scale site. There's 4 to 5 county ongoing regional vaccination sites, which is on hold. The local pharmacies which are vaccinating is CVS, South Yarmouth, East Falmouth, Walgreens in Hyannis, and Stop and Shops in Hyannis and Harwich.
And I'd just like to jump right in here a little bit with Diane. The plans we've been working on for the vaccinations for the is dependent on vaccine, obviously, but working very closely with senior citizen on trying to get our homebound people age 75 and above. And as Diane mentioned with Harbor Community Health, Outer Cape, and VNA. Last mile is something that will come at a later date when they can get state approval. Okay, Kyle. Here's the contacts. Diane, you can mention how we've been reaching out to these people.
Yeah, so at Senior Services, we've had calls coming in and emails coming in. So we're working very hard to make sure that these people get put onto lists. We have 3 different lists that about 4 different lists that we're working on. One's the homebound list, one's the 75 and older list, one's the 65 to 74-year-old list, and one's the 60 to 65 list. So we're working off those lists and we're trying to fill them as, as needed as they come across. Meals on Wheels, I have just sent out 2 Meals on Wheels for tonight. They'll be putting in their lunches tomorrow or for their meals tomorrow. The registration form, that needs to come back before any homebound person can get vaccine at home. So we need to, we have a list together of the homebound list, and then we'll be able to collect those registration forms and get them vaccinated. And Bruce has been reaching out to the local churches.
Yes, I've called all our local churches, the Masonic Lodge, if they know of anybody that's homebound or might need assistance, that we've added to the senior list that I just forwarded that way. Thank you, Kyle. Our vaccination team that's been working together over the last several months, besides the health department and Diane at the Council on Aging, the police department and fire department are also very involved. Diane and I probably talk once a day on a slow day. It's usually 3 or 4 days, 7 days a week, it seems like, even at night. Fire department, they're ready to go as needed as paramedics as we send out a vaccination team. Police department will also be assisting. So we have a great team working together within town. Okay, Kyle? The team who we're working with is Harbor Community Health, as Diane said, that has already done 60 residents, 40 we used the bus, and then we had 20 last week. But we're informed today that they did not get any extra vaccine or vaccine for us to use. They're doing all second doses. So we probably won't be back to Harbor Health and Hyannis for 2 weeks. Outer Cape Health, Community Health is the one that's going to do our homebound. And that's the one that Diane's working, submitting the list and contacting back and forth quite a bit. So we've talked to them. They'll be working with various teams coming into town, and we're probably going to have about at least 80 to 100 homebounds that we plan to at least to start with, that should get through them all that we have listed now. Within probably 2 weeks, we'll start that. And then we'll continue to work with the county health department, and VNA might be assisting us with homebound vaccinations also. Thank you. This is Diane.
Yeah, so this just shows the amount of calls that we've taken in just last week alone. The call log jumped up from 294 calls 3 months ago up to 1,776 total calls that we've taken in. Emails have increased as well, but we have not calculated all that out, but they've increased as well, just as well. So we're up 84% on our call log.
I would say on that, hold it right there, Kyle, go back. The number of calls that Diane's getting is, it's unbelievable, 80, 90 calls a day. And that's the list that Diane's maintaining of people that need a shot, that's the elderly. And that list has been provided to Cape Cod Hospital. So Cape Cod Hospital is making calls off that list along with other towns. So I know there's been a question of what numbers of the hospital been calling, but Diane, do you want to say how many lists that how many were on the list that you gave them the last week?
For just under 4,000.
Yeah. So so they're calling. A lot of people have already had a shot, but the hospital's working through that list. Okay, Kyle. Thank you. That's the direct line right to Diane right there. There you go.
So Diane, can you repeat that again? I hate to jump in in the middle of your presentation, but did you say that we've submitted 4,000, we have 4,000 names on a list?
4,000 names to Cape
These are,
Cod Health.
these are homebound seniors who are still awaiting vaccination. Is that correct?
Okay,
Wow.
so there's about 100 homebound, and we submitted a list for 4,000 seniors, age 65 and older,
Okay,
to get vaccinated.
thank you.
So we're trying to work through that list to see how many still, Cape Cod Hospital still need a vaccination, and they'll coordinate with the college that they're working at. But we also tell people, even though we've submitted the list of 4,000, they should also continue to try to either get on the local pharmacy or at the college also. Okay, thank you. County vaccination helpline is still available. The people may need assistance trying to get online. We still recommend giving them a call and trying to get on yourself. I know it's frustrating to try to get on, and that's what we continue to hear, but it's worth a call if you need to. Okay. The state vaccination line, MA immunizations to get on. We know how frustrating it is. Talked to 2 people today. They kept waiting and waiting and waiting, and couldn't get on. Matter of fact, got booted off, and then when they finally got on, it said they were out. They didn't have any vaccinations left. So still very difficult trying to get a vaccination appointment and getting enough vaccine down here. So with that, the person to call on the next slide is. We'll end with Governor Baker's always waiting for a call, and I still haven't heard back from my calls to him.
Thank
So
you,
that
Bruce.
that overall ends the overall presentation.
Very good. I'm going to ask board members if they have any questions for either Diane or for Bruce. Tracy?
I do, and I know I reached out to both you and Bruce earlier. He somewhat explained it. What's been outlined is wonderful, and I thank you both for the work that's been done. My concern was that I was hearing from folks that Cape Cod Healthcare was reaching out to people, not from the Council on Aging list, but from their personal doctors. And my concern is that the control of the vaccine should be to all Cape Cod residents, not just physicians within their network. So that was just that's just my point, that I hope that there's a fair process and that Cape Cod Healthcare isn't prioritizing the people that use their physicians over the general population. So that's my concern. I don't know if that's reality. That's what I've heard. The people that told me that they get calls told me specifically it was because their physician was in the network. They were not on a Council of Aging list. But in any event, that's really just the only question I have. But I can't thank you enough. I know that those phone calls, there's been a lot of people and a lot of really great comments I've heard from people when they do call. Diane, you're answering. They're not getting the frustration. They feel like they've been heard. They know that somebody's working to help them, and I think that that's half the battle. Obviously, getting them the vaccine is the end result, and it has been successful for a lot of them. So we are making progress. I just can't thank you enough.
Thank you very much. Diane, can you just say how many phone lines you have up there and how the calls are being handled?
Yeah, we have 4 open phone lines. So we do have dedicated people on the phone lines, primarily from 10 to 2. We have tax work-off employees assisting, so they're able to answer the calls and return the calls if they missed a call.
That's great.
I think what you've been hearing with the the Cape Cod Healthcare patients receiving priority or precedence over everybody else, I think that they had vaccinated a lot of patients prior to every town giving them a list. We gave all the COAs gave them a list last week. So they're taking that, and they have one person assigned to a town, so that the one person is calling the people from the town, from Yarmouth.
That's great. Any other board members? Mike Stone.
Um, I'm really concerned about this homebound group. Many of those people, in addition to being elderly, are disabled. I ran into a neighbor of mine who, over the weekend, and I asked how she was doing with her shot. And she said that both she and her husband had gotten them at CVS in South Yarmouth. And I haven't seen him out of the house literally in years. I don't know what his particular medical condition is, but I know he's disabled and he's very, very ill. And she said that she actually got an ambulance to come and get him and bring him to the CVS, and it cost her $200. And then she had to get an ambulance to bring him again a second time, but she wasn't going to wait because I guess apparently his health is very poor, and the wait could, it could cause him to get, seriously ill, or it could cause his death. So that group is really vulnerable. And I very honestly didn't think a lot about it until I talked to her. And then ever since then, I became very concerned about it. So I'm glad that there's some initial effort underway. I didn't realize that there was. So I commend you on that. But I think these people are very, probably in the highest risk group that there is. Now, she was over, I don't know her age, but she was over 75. And both her and her husband, they were in that first group. And she said that she was concerned because when they got to this, the pharmacy, it was supposed to snow that day. So she was wondering whether she should go. It was really a really sad story. The other thing I wanted to mention, and I don't know how they're doing it in other localities, but I was talking to a good friend of mine who has her all of her medical appointments up at Leahy Clinic in Burlington, and she said she actually got a call from them. I think it was at the end of last week, asking her when would be a good time to schedule her injection at her primary care doctor's office there. So apparently in other parts of the state, there's some kind of distribution of the vaccine through medical facilities that treat patients. And I was just wondering, if Bruce, if you know anything about that and why that's happening there and perhaps not happening in our region.
Well, the distribution of the vaccine has always been a big discussion, where the Cape is still getting the limited doses and it's not distributed between the counties, I'd say fairly. So once vaccine becomes more available, I think we'll see more of it. But unfortunately, that's the way it's being distributed right now.
So
we have made that concerns repeatedly to Department of Public Health.
And just so we're clear, and I address this question both to both of you, what's the best thing for someone to do that's homebound in terms of making sure that they get someone's attention, that they get on that list as soon as possible? What's their best approach?
They should call into the senior center on that number that Bruce provided, in extension 1337, and they'll get put right onto that list immediately.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Dan Horgan, any comments?
Yes, just two quick questions, Bruce. Who exactly is helping with the homebound shots? What professionals are actually doing that?
We'll have nurses from Outer Cape Health, Community Health. We'll probably have 1 or 2 teams. We'll have the fire department assisting them. The Outer Cape Community Health, they'll have a paramedic there because they have to watch the person for 15 minutes while that community goes to the next one at homebound. And then we'll also have 1 or 2 fire department paramedic teams also going home to home. We'll split the town up by village, so we'll be able to dedicate which teams are going where. So we're going to have at least 4 teams. and we might even have a team from the VNA. So they'll all be professionally staffed and trained nurses or paramedics.
Secondly, are you able to keep statistics and track the percentage of our residents that are getting inoculated?
Unfortunately, no. The state is not able to break out how many people have gone through the list, either through the computer system Prep Pro that they put in, or even the ones that we've turned over to the Cape Cod Hospital. We're not even sure how many of them have got an appointment, let's say, to the community college or somewhere. So there's no way to get a real good feel of how many are getting vaccinated. We'll know from our list, but we're just such a small percent. We're also working with our senior housing on Winslow Gray. There's going to be a site set up there to take care of all those seniors within the next week. And also at Simpkins School across the street, they're going to have a, let's say, a small clinic there to take care of that group.
Okay, thank you.
Eric Tully?
Nothing at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric. I'm just amazed that we have a list of 4,000 people 65 and over that still need to be vaccinated. I mean, that's just unbelievable.
Right.
And it just shows you what a complete failure this current program is. And I can't imagine, I mean, I'm sure one of the reasons why the calls are so high is because people are desperately trying to get themselves vaccinated. And I agree with the comments made by the other board members and Tracy, just having someone to talk to, someone to connect with, and to know that we're doing everything that we can within the town of Yarmouth to help people get vaccinated. I think that's so incredibly important. I know that's very demanding and very taxing. And I think what you're hearing from the board is a genuine expression of thanks and gratitude for all your hard work on behalf of so many folks who I know who are incredibly stressed and frustrated. So thank you.
Thank you.
Unless there are any.
I just have one more question. I guess I'm a little confused. At the beginning of the presentation, I thought you said you did not yet have the vaccine available for the home visits. Are you saying you do?
Correct. No, we don't have it yet, but it's planned. We were planning to have it in 2 to 3 weeks. That's when we're planning the visit. And
Okay.
So we're not sure out of that 4,000 how many have already had their vaccine. So that's the problem. So you got to work through that whole list. And I know Diane's gone through a lot of it, and the people have already had it. So we're trying to pare that list down.
Very good, thank you.
Thank you.
Unless there's anything else, we can excuse Bruce and team. Thank you again, and we'll bring up the next item on the agenda. So the next item is a discussion on the annual town meeting with the town clerk and the town moderator. So Kyle, can you make sure we get Mary and Ken and Pat? Okay. Mary, are we going to be able to see you?
You should be. I can share my video. We should be all set.
Bingo. There we go. We can see you.
There we go.
How about the moderator? Are we going to be able to see the moderator, Kyle?
He'll have to start his video.
Okay, Mr. Moderator, we're waiting for you. And we have Pat. There we are. Okay.
I think Ken's still on mute too.
Not
There you
anymore.
go. All right.
Welcome, everybody.
Thank
We
you.
have our town clerk, our town moderator, and our jack of all trades, Pat Armstrong. Okay, Mary, are you going to go first?
We can do it however you'd like.
Well, we'll start with you.
All right. So I think first things first, I know you folks had originally spoken about moving town meeting to another date. I did make a suggestion of May 15th, but I know Mr. Moody's not available on that day. So another date in May may be more appropriate. My only comment, the May 22nd should work. However, I would just point out that we may have some, that'll be post-election. So there may be new members of the board if, depending on how the election unfolds on the 18th. So I think first things first is to figure out what you folks would like to do about the date.
Okay, so that's a question for us. Is before we go into that, is there any other, we have Ken, anybody else want to sort of present to this question or?
No, just from my standpoint, there's 52 Saturdays in the year and I'm available 51 of them, except that one.
Got it. So are there any other Saturdays or dates that either the three of you would like to recommend that the board consider?
What about the 15th, Mary?
So the
Dan, that's the one.
15th is the date that Ken
Oh, he
isn't
can't go.
available.
All right, so,
So the 22nd would be the next. Dennis's town meeting is the 8th. So, so that posed a question as to whether the administration for the school department would be able to staff both town meetings.
Right.
So that would push us out to the 22nd. May 9th, I believe, is Mother's Day, if that's correct. So the Sunday after the Saturday Dennis meeting doesn't appear that it would work either. So
Is the building available, have we picked, we haven't really picked even a space, so availability of a space, should that be our priority? Should we
So I
just,
think once we know what your thoughts are, we can certainly vet that first thing tomorrow and Thursday to just kind of get a sense as to whether the spaces are available. You know, if we're still talking an outdoor meeting, you know, there are a few possibilities when you're talking fields, but the need to have probably generator electricity available will be one of the key components.
I mean, I think the last time Mark, say somebody banging on your ceiling.
Yeah, I've been dealing with this issue all meeting. There's this static in the background and it's very, very disturbing. And
Well,
so that's why I keep disappearing every few minutes because I have to step aside to see if I can stop it. So in fact, I have to deal with it right now. Oh, it's gone away. It should be all right for a minute or two.
So I
go
know
ahead.
last time we had a mixed opinion from the board about outdoor a meeting. I think after watching last year, you know, we're always working to do whatever we can to increase participation. And I think the comfort level is extremely important for people. And perhaps if it were outside, maybe we'd have a higher attendance. So that would be something I'd be interested in exploring. I don't know how the rest of the board feels, but I think that based on that, if we went in that direction, you know, that would.
So let's do this. Let's break the conversation up a bit. Let's talk a little bit about indoors versus outdoors because we have received a fair amount of commentary from residents about outdoors being a more appropriate venue. I'm going to just survey the board members to find out if there's a strong feeling one way or the other. Tracy seems to be interested in outdoors. Let me ask you, Dan, and then I'll go to Mike and Eric. Dan, what about you?
I'm not opposed to an outside meeting. I would prefer an outdoor meeting if we can do it.
So your preference is outdoors?
Yeah.
Okay. Mike, do you have a preference?
I don't have a preference. I'm amenable to either one, but if the consensus from the feedback from the public is they would prefer outdoor, I'm fine with that.
And Eric, do you have a preference?
I don't have a preference. You know, I know that other towns have held outdoor meetings successfully. You know, obviously there are a lot of variables involved in an outdoor meeting that are beyond our control, and you know that's what worries me. So, but I will defer to the will of the majority of the board.
Yeah, I do recall getting a fair number of emails from residents expressing interest in going outdoors. So the feedback I think has been pretty strong. What about you, Mr. Moderator? And do you have a preference?
If I had a vote, I'd vote for outdoors.
Okay, Mary?
So I'd vote for the outdoors as well. I know Harwich and Chatham both ran fairly successful fall town meetings outside on their football fields. So I think it's certainly doable, and, you know, steal from those who have done it before and done it well to figure out what worked and what was problematic for them.
Right.
You know, it's just a matter of checking with the school to make sure the, you know, the football field would be available if that's the appropriate location for it.
I'm going to ask Pat Armstrong, and then I'm going to ask Bob to weigh in. Pat, do you have a preference?
Well, when I talked to Mark Grills today in regards to where he would recommend that we go, and I read Mary's report about the voting machines, one of the concerns that I had if you go in that direction is the aluminum bleachers are considered to be obstructing of the voting machines, and they're recommending that wherever you have them outside, they're not near those aluminum bleachers. So the high school football field might not be your best option. Also, they're still playing sports, but over adjacent to the parking lot at Matikes, there's a large grass area that would be the same location, but outside. We could manage it accordingly. Might be able to put up a small tent, maybe not enough to cover 400 people, but a smaller tent. And I don't believe the Matikes school teams will be significantly impacted by it. And we can also share our sports fields with them if we need to displace them. Their football field was internal to the track at Matikes, and a few years ago it became a solar field, so we can't use that part of the Matikes property, but we're thinking, again, it might be easier to go there outdoors. And if by chance the indoor is required because of poor weather, because we know in May we get high winds and rain and a lot. So there's an opportunity if we're there, we could move indoors if we needed to, but we could be outdoors as much as possible. And I know when we ran concerts there at the band show for a while, people used to bring their own chairs. So it's not like we're going to have to rent and set up 200 chairs. We can coordinate the setting up of chairs significant, distanced appropriately, and have the school and how we situate it to do what Mary needs and what Ken needs there. I think I could put my team together to pull that off for you.
And I don't want to end this discussion without hearing from our interim town administrator, Mr. Lott.
I think Mary had a comment.
I just
before, and
have
then I'll-
one follow-up if I could, Mr. Chair. I think setting up on the football field, I wouldn't anticipate our voters being on the metal bleachers. And I think, when we talk about whether or not we want to go with clickers, certainly the vendors that are saying, their radio frequency technology, I think that's a big negative against their product. But, I know in Harwich, when we did our fall town meeting, our voters weren't sitting on the bleachers. We were sitting in chairs set up in front of the moderator without a tent. That being said, there may have been covering over the selectmen and the moderator, but not over the general public. So I just wanted to follow up on that. I wouldn't anticipate voters being on metal bleachers, regardless of where we are, just for social distancing purposes and for sightline purposes. I think it would be much harder to see people on the bleachers if you're, depending on the way you set up your
I
plan.
appreciate that. I'd still like to sort of resolve the indoors versus the outdoors. Bob, did you want to weigh in on this topic?
It seems that we could do outdoors. The finance committee came across very strongly several weeks ago, wishing to be outside. It will cost more. We'll certainly have to do a lot of logistics. Pat and I had a brief conversation today, and she and Mary can get together and start talking about, if the date is the 22nd, making the arrangements. That should give us enough time. And that idea, I hadn't thought about it, but the idea, if it does rain, if we were at the Matikes field, we might be able to reserve going inside if we had to. I hadn't thought about that, as opposed to the high school, where it would be more difficult to go into any space there that would accommodate the necessary people. But I think the important thing is for the board to agree on a date. And if it is May 22nd, we'd want to start to fix that so that Mary and Pat could start doing their work.
I understand. Is there any, well, so there seems to be a consensus in terms of going outside, that's desirable. And the suggestion to doing it at Matakees offers the advantage of, as Pat suggested, if there is a problem, to go indoors. So you've got literally the ability to sort of deal with that problem, which I think is a very important point. So I appreciate Pat bringing that up. And so if that's the case, Tracy, did you have something that you wanted to say?
Well, no, I mean, I agree with all that. I think that doing it at Matakees, I think when you move around the places, it gets confusing, first of all. So if there is space available at Matakees and we have the ability to go inside, I think that's wonderful. In terms of costs, though, I mean, most of the towns that I saw, or I remember going to the Orleans Park after, they didn't have a tent either. So if we had the ability to go inside for inclement weather, that would be another additional savings. So we wouldn't have to do a tent at all. I think May, we're looking at now instead of last year. I think we were looking at in June, potentially more, hot. So I think that those are all great ideas. I would support outside. People bring their own chairs. I think we should have foldable chairs for people should they forget theirs. But at least that way people can space however they feel comfortable and still be prepared if there's bad weather to be able to go inside on May 22nd. I'd be in favor of that.
Okay, thanks. Any other comments? So it looks like we're looking at the 22nd, Matakee, outdoors first. We've got the option to go indoors if we have a problem. Let's talk a little bit about the 22nd. Are there any, let's talk about the pros and the cons of the 22nd. Let's first talk about the cons. I'm going to ask Mary and Ken, Pat, and the rest. What do you see as the downside to picking that date?
Well, the thing that was brought up, and I don't know the answer, but again, I'll do any date if I'm available. The issue of the election, I guess my question would be, if there's an election on the 18th, when are people actually sworn in? I don't think they're sworn in on the 19th. So
yes,
I think there would be some continuity. It could be a little awkward, but
well, the good thing
to me is the only.
Yeah, we can ask Mary. Mary,
yeah, that's the only issue that I would have, Mark.
Okay, Mary.
So they would be sworn in on the 19th. Many towns traditionally had their town elections before their town meetings, and that was an issue for some communities that they now had new selectmen that were present to vote on a warrant that they hadn't prepared. So some communities had rearranged the order of those two, of the town meeting and town election. It's not a problem. It's just a fact to point out that if there's a change in the Board of Selectmen on the 18th, you're going to have new selectmen that would be present at that meeting. Is it a problem? No, it's just a point of fact to point out to you all.
Okay.
And we used to do that all of the time from, at least as I know, 1978 through, I think, the 1980s. So it seemed to work. We can make it work.
I like it better this way.
All right.
I changed that.
Is there anybody on the board that objects to the 22nd as a date?
No.
I don't hear anyone.
Okay.
I think the only one who would be, Eric would be the only one who potentially wouldn't be able to sit through what he might have considered his last town meeting if we do that, if he's fine with it. You'll still come, right, Eric? We can recognize you.
My final act will be doing what's best in the best interest of the town.
There we go.
Okay. So it seems like we have as a board a consensus.
Okay.
22nd is the date. Matakee,
And
Saturday.
And we'll work on that and get you the necessary paperwork, working with Mary on when to formally call the meeting, get the warrant set, et cetera.
That'd be great. Unless there's anything else to add or talk. Oh, I see Tracy's got her
I
finger
just
up.
want to ask Mary a question about the ballot. We were talking, this may not have anything to do with this particular topic, but do you know when the ballot gets printed?
So the ballot can't get printed until after April 15th. The 13th is the last day that kind of your candidates are validated to the town clerk's office,
Okay.
the 15th is the last day for a candidate to withdraw. So we traditionally wouldn't print the ballot, order the ballots printed until the 16th so that we don't have any issues.
Okay, thank you.
Very good. So let me just ask one other question. Bob, do you think we need to take a vote tonight to pick the date and the venue? Or are we do have a consensus?
I think I think the consensus right now would be sufficient, because I hate to have you take a vote and then you have to rescind it if something occurs that we are not aware of. So I think staff knows where you want to go. We can work on that, and in the next several weeks, finalize it, and then take the necessary votes as they come up. And Mary, did the board have to vote on the ballot? Or I know they voted already on the questions.
So they
I
will
believe.
need to, we traditionally do 2 separate warrants in Yarmouth. So
Yep.
we would do a separate ballot warrant for the election and a warrant for the town meeting. So that will be calendared appropriately.
Okay, so April would be the date for the ballot, and then sometime early in May, most likely for the warrant itself,
Correct.
if I'm correct. Okay, thank you.
Okay, that's very good. Well, thank you, Mary. Thank you, Ken. Thank you, Pat. Appreciate all your advice, all your guidance, all your counsel. And you have the rest of the night off.
Wait, are we
Thank
good?
you.
There
Mr.
was
Chair.
one other,
The
Yeah.
Oh,
clickers,
I'm sorry. Yeah, let me back up. There was the
Mary has
question
a big memo.
about the tablets and the electronic devices. I apologize. Yes.
That's quite all right. So this started, we looked into kind of the pricing. There is a memo to you with a quick cheat sheet for a chart that gives kind of the 3 main companies that are providing the services and the products. The second page there, correct. The last, the third row is Option Technologies. They actually just provided me with some additional kind of pricing information. They're the ones that do the Orleans, Eastham, and Nantucket town meetings.
Mhm.
And their pricing is primarily based on renting. They recommend that you rent and use them as a service. So they would be looking at, for an average of 800 voters for a 1-day town meeting, would be under the new pricing would actually be $13,000 a year. 10,800 if we are looking at giving them a 3-year guaranteed contract. And that's for a 1-day meeting. It would be an additional $1,000 to $1,200 per day for each additional day the town meeting goes forward. So just kind of as a sense for what some of the local communities are doing, that's the pricing that Option Technologies is actually closer to what's real for us versus what was in this chart. Turning Technologies is the one that had said to us that radio frequencies could be a problem with metal bleachers. So I wonder about metal chairs and metal anything in the vicinity. And Meridia Technologies is one that really works on a sale basis only. There's a one-time fee. They sell them in 500 units or 1,000 unit packages. And that would be a one-time fee with no annual subscriptions or license fees. They just continually provide it while you have their product, and they set up your first town meeting. There would be an additional cost of up to, say, $4,500 if we wanted them to actually provide the service at the meeting. But that would be a question as to whether we would need to do that going forward. They tell us that they provide the initial service and training, and that they will provide training throughout if we need any assistance. And all the companies are telling us that their handsets generally have about a 10-year, at least a 10-year shelf life. So it's a lot of money any way we go. There certainly is a benefit to having the clicker technologies. They can be repurposed for other uses within the town and during the non-election seasons. The question is really whether the town wants to take that expense on and start moving towards the technologies. I will say, I've spoken with the assistant town clerk in Orleans. They really like the product. They use option technologies. They use them to do their setup, and they've had good luck with it. Falmouth uses turning technologies. They've had good luck with it. They like the product. I have not spoken to anybody about the Meridia technologies yet, as far as using them going forward and what their meeting experience has been. But that's the third option that seems to be the more cost effective, if you know, on the first glance. It's really just a matter of whether you folks think our, you know, once or twice a year town meeting warrants the expense of the electronic clickers. And we'll make it work either way.
Thank you, Mary. Do we have it? There's no other presentation on this topic, so I'm just going to go right to the board members and ask if they have questions. I know, Tracy, obviously this is a hot topic for you. Do you have any questions, Tracy?
Well, I just see so many benefits. Personally, I see a lot of benefits from utilizing this, even prior to COVID. I'm disappointed that the prices went up from that third company. My question really is, it is a substantial investment. And to the extent that, you know, you use it once or twice a year, when you say repurpose for other things, can you give me an idea of what you're thinking?
So the companies are telling us that, you know, you could use it for surveys. If you could use it for larger meetings throughout the year. If you had, you know, what if the planning board was doing a survey like they're doing now, their visioning project, perhaps there would be a way for them to kind of repurpose the clickers for a larger meeting on an event like that. No concrete examples, just people have done it. You know, most of these technologies were developed for business use and for corporate use, and now they're finding their way into the municipal government. Meridia is actually the opposite of that. They actually created the technology for Congress, and they are now repurposing it from their original use as on the congressional floor to local governments now. So,
well, some of the reasons I think it's extremely important. Several years back, we haven't had any hot topic issues of big budget numbers for our public safety, but I know many years ago, I had concerns about, you know, we'd have things typically pass at town meeting and perhaps not at the ballot, because I don't think people always feel comfortable with their neighbors or with police or fire standing there staring when they have to raise their hand. So that's one reason I think that it's extremely important to have a little privacy with what they vote. And, you know, one of the surveys that we took in terms of getting more people to town meeting, one of the big things that people said was that the length of the meeting is too long. We need to speed it up. And I think that this will reduce the length of our meetings considerably when we have the hand counts. I know Ken and I spoke after one of the other, I think not last year, but the year before, when this idea was floated a couple of years ago. And I don't think we really had a really good discussion about the benefits of it. After that next town meeting, that we had 2 or 3 hand votes that didn't go very well, and they were a little bit lengthy. They would have been beneficial. So those are just a couple of the reasons that I see it. It would be nice, however, if we could find another town perhaps that is interested in this type of technology that don't meet on the same dates that we do, that perhaps we could split with or share the system.
So to that end, I did reach out to Dennis and Harwich, 2 towns that I know don't have traditionally the same town meeting dates that we do. Harwich was going to bring it to their Board of Selectmen. Dennis has already said no, they have no interest in using the clickers. So when I hear back from Harwich, I have reached out. When I hear back, we can certainly follow up with you on that, if that's a possibility. And, you know, we can look into other ways to fund the clickers on, you know, an initial purchase. perhaps we can see if there are other funding mechanisms for a purchase versus a rental. Obviously, Orleans, Eastham, they're not going to be involved because they're using it strictly as a service and they have their contracts in place. But certainly we're happy to look into it. The one caution with any of these systems, we have to have enough clickers. So
Absolutely.
if we have a big town meeting, if we purchase 1,000 of them and we have a meeting that brings 1,002 people, we are not going to be able to use the clicker system. So, that part of the reason that I lean towards the 1,000 units on Meridia is that traditionally we have been, under 700. I believe Bob will tell us that there were meetings that have had over 1,000 back in the day. We haven't seen that lately, but we could. So, to the extent that we do it, we need to plan accordingly. The rentals with adding units on the day of the meeting, the only question I still have for a lot of for the other two companies is how long it takes to get those extra units up and running. So we can prepare for everything ahead of time. But if you have 200 people storming the gate at 6 o'clock for town meeting, I don't know what the delay is going to be in getting those extra rental units up and ready programmed in order to move forward in a timely fashion for town meeting. So that's kind of the big question mark for me on whether we have the availability the day of to rent additional units. Again, another reason if we were going to go forward, I would lean more towards the purchase of the 1,000 units. That seems to be, under the numbers that we've had in the last 15 years or so. But that being said, we can make anything work. And I do agree with you. I do think these will speed up the time of town meeting, but we can always do a secret ballot if it's simply a matter that people you feel intimidated to raise their hand. We can always call for a special secret ballot. As the town clerk, we will always prepare to have multiples of those during the course of a meeting. So is it a longer time to count those? Yes. But we can always accommodate the intimidation factor if it's existing on a particular question. So
another question I had, and I know Dan Horgan and I had spoke about it when I had originally kind of floated this. If we had 1,000 units, are you able to use them in multiple locations?
So we would need receivers to accept them. So depending on the area that we're using, I would suspect that at a situation like Mattakees, where you've got the auditorium and the gymnasium, as long as you have receivers located in the vicinities, they should then talk back to the computers as long as there isn't a problem in the facility itself. Certainly, we would probably want to test that before we made a final purchase. Make sure that our typical locations were able to communicate with the systems in general. But most of these purchase orders were all proposals were all set based on a certain number of receivers within 200 or 300 feet of the location. So
I was thinking more along the lines of multiple separate locations.
So that I don't think so. I'm not sure that you would be able to have it in, have the auditorium at two separate schools running at the same time. Certainly a follow-up question I'm happy to ask.
Okay, and do you know why the rental went up so much? And if there's any trial, so it's a big expense for somebody who's never used it before. It would be nice to have a 1-year trial to see if it's something we want to purchase.
So we certainly could do the 1 year. I reached back out to him because of the numbers, knowing that the 500 that I had originally requested price quotes on really isn't realistic for us. We would need to plan for a higher number than that on a regular basis. When I got back to him and asked about the additional dates, whether it was going to cost us additional money for a second day if we were doing a Tuesday, Wednesday night or a Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday night kind of traditional non-Saturday town meeting. The spreadsheet that he gave me is 800 voters for one day would be $13,000 if it's a one-year contract. For subsequent days, it would be an additional 8,362 for subsequent days. So
That doesn't make sense. I mean, if you're gonna do that, you might as well purchase them.
it,
I would,
and
I
that's,
would,
but they are providing this service. So for them, for this company in particular option, they are doing the setup. You are renting the units. Supposedly you were renting their top of the line unit. They if you do a purchase through them, it's a completely different unit that's that doesn't have all the bells and whistles. It doesn't show you the receipt that you voted, doesn't show you the screen and the tally at the same time. So this was based on my follow-up question as to what we would be looking at for, you know, the additional kind of units if we were renting as a service and doing it kind of the way Orleans did it versus, you know, my first question. So yeah, he was saying the, and I'm happy to scan this to you folks. I apologize, it only came in at just before 5 o'clock today. This quote says an annual budget for in 2021 dollars for turnkey rental package with advanced option finder G series handsets. 800 voters one day on a one-year contract is 13,231 or 10,849. 800 voters for subsequent days would be $8,362. And then a cost per day for each day for between meetings, if any, would be an additional, you know, $1,200. So I'm not sure if he's saying that, you know, they're coming on site and they're going to be here for 3 days and you've got a meeting on Monday night and then you've got a meeting on Wednesday night. They're going to charge you for the interim day where they're not really providing the service. But it's a significant cost for that, you know, for those 800 voters for the one day. Not saying it's not a valuable service. It's just a matter of, you know, for planning purposes, if that's what you're looking at annually, maybe it does make sense to do a purchase. All of these companies are willing to come out and do a demo, and obviously would have to, based on these numbers, would have to do true 30B services purchases, or whether it's a purchase for service or a purchase of the product itself. These quotes were just for informational purposes for this meeting. But
thank you.
Thank you, Tracy. Eric, any comments or questions for Mary and the team?
No, I don't have any questions. Thank you.
Okay, Mike Stone.
The only comments I'd have is, I mean, we generally have trouble getting people to come to town meeting. First of all, the numbers haven't really been that good, with this exception of the year when we had on the
motorcycles
on the agenda, motorcycles and guns.
Right.
If you want to get the people there, that's apparently how you do it. And Dan would know better than I, but I don't think we've had a hand count in a long time on a vote. I mean, most of the votes are voice unanimous votes, or in the moderator's judgment, passed by the requisite majority. So in the old days, we used to have a lot of hand counts, but I haven't seen a hand count in a long time.
There was one a couple of years ago, Mike, that was actually reversed the original vote.
Was it?
There was one, because it was they call, you know, it was an aberration, but it did happen.
Yeah. So, I mean, I don't know, you know, and the numbers we're talking, 1,000 people, you know, it's almost like as if, I mean, when's the last time you saw 1,000 people? Probably back in the 1980s. We don't get those kind of numbers.
1977, I think.
The one interest, though, I think, from my point of view, would be viable, would be the point Tracy raised about, you know, people not wanting to publicly express their vote, or putting it another way, to protect the confidentiality of the vote, or the privacy of the vote, yeah, it would definitely would serve that purpose. But other than that, I don't have a problem with the concept. I just think on a practical level, I don't know if we have the demand to warrant purchasing the system.
Thank you, Mike. Dan?
I'm kind of thinking along with Mike, this economic climate that we're in, whether we have the demand. To Tracy's point, I always thought that this would be a great idea if we could use multiple sites that made it easier for people to gather other than at the one location. Ideally, it'd be great if we could let people vote from their home. I don't know if that's ever going to be feasible, but that's the only way we're really going to see a real spike in participation at town meeting. I support the concept of it. I just don't know if now is the time for us to be taking on this added expense. And to be honest with you, there's something to be said for the power of going to town meeting and speaking publicly to what you believe and voting publicly to what you believe. I know that it's often said that there's an intimidation factor, and that's true, especially on high-profile budget matters. But it's also the case, I think, that it's important for neighbors to see where other neighbors stand on particular items. And it's also where we learn a little bit about leadership and a little bit of courage, frankly, to stand up in front of our neighbors and to raise our hand in support of something that we perhaps know that some of our friends aren't supportive of. So it's a double-edged sword in my mind. I like the concept. It's expensive. Mark, I would love to see the county make a large purchase of these and make them available for towns. I think that makes much more sense than individual towns making this purchase. I like the idea that Tracy mentioned about a cost share, or Mary possibly had mentioned that. I think we need a little more work. The idea is a sound one, I think. I just am not sure that this town meeting or this year is the time to do it.
Thank you. Thank you, Dan. In terms of my concerns, let me just say, first of all, I appreciate all the work, Mary, that you put into getting this all together. This is a very good briefing for us, and I appreciate that work that went into it. I get a little concerned when, this would be our first outdoor town meeting. And, how many new things do we want to try in one town meeting? How many potential issues or problems might we have to wrestle with? That's the thing that I get concerned about is that there are going to be some logistics challenges or surprises just by going outdoors. And then to add other potential surprises, I just get a little concerned. My tendency is to be a bit conservative and to be very careful about trying too many new things at once. I do like the idea of sharing technology with another town or two to bring the overall cost down. But I'm a little reluctant to pull the trigger for this town meeting just yet. And so I think it's worth exploring. I'd be interested to see what Harwich is. I do think it's worth, if Harwich is genuinely interested in partnering with us, I think that's definitely worth bringing back to the board. I don't know if other board members feel that way, but if Harwich wanted to get into this, I would certainly find that very intriguing because it brings the overall cost down. But again, it doesn't address the other concern about how many new things do you want to try in one town meeting. So I don't know if we're giving you enough direction or enough of a sense, but I think you can see the boards. And I don't know if Eric, if you want to, indicate a preference or not, it would be helpful to know if you like the idea of doing this and doing it for this town meeting, if you have any thoughts about that. Because I think we're hearing some general reservations across the board here, except maybe for Tracy.
Well, the cost does concern me.
Yeah.
As does your concern with, how many curveballs do we throw at once?
Okay.
I guess my big question is what is it that is necessitating the need for these devices? Is it simply the fact that, you know, voice votes are going to be too difficult outdoors? Is that what we're worried about?
No, it's a good question, and I don't really have an answer to that. I don't think so. I think initially the technology was brought up before, when we weren't dealing with COVID, and we were looking for ways to move town meetings along at a brisker pace, so that it itself could help with turnout. But
to Mike's point, I mean, personally, I couldn't justify the cost. We have so few hand counts. And, you know, shaving one hand count is going to save you 15 minutes, assuming it's gotten correctly the first time. So, you know, I don't think the cost is justified personally, but again, you know, I'll defer, but, you know, I have serious reservations about the need for this at all.
Okay. Very good. So we've had plenty of discussion. If there's a board member that would like to maybe make a motion, I'm open to that. But if not, I think enough's been said. I think there's the board's clearly leaning against, at least for this year, moving forward with it. But again, if someone would like to put a motion on the floor, I'd be happy to entertain it.
Well, I think you've given direction on some additional information that you'd like. Mary can certainly work on getting that. I didn't anticipate you were going to do it for this year. As far as the cost, we might be able to use some COVID money, because there still is some. I mean, it's a legitimate expense. I'm not saying that that's what we should do, but it may be an option, and that's good for the rest of this year. So I think we can proceed. I don't know that you necessarily need a motion, but we can proceed, get the additional information, find out what other towns are doing. Mary can fine tune some of these numbers just on a quote basis, and then we can bring it back to you for a decision.
Okay, that's great. Unless there's any objection to that, let's move in that direction, Bob.
I'm
Mary,
happy to do that, and I'm happy to let you know what Howard's decided, and we'll get some follow-ups on some of the follow-up questions answered, get some revised information to you folks so that you can, make a decision whether it's for this year or next. As far as, the 1,000 handsets, I look at the 1,000 handsets only because some of them are going to walk out the door, some of them are going to break, some of them are going to disappear, some won't work on the night of the meeting. So you just kind of always want to be prepared for having enough. But I'm happy to get some follow-up questions answered. We'll get you some revised information as soon as I can, and we can go from there.
That's great. Thank you again for a great briefing. Thank you, Mary.
Okay. Thank you. Have a good night.
Good night. So we're going to move on to the next item on the agenda for this evening. We're going to move on to the DPW FY22 budget recommendations, and we're going to call up Mr. Colby, our DPW director. If we can find him. Paging Jeff Colby, DPW director. There he is.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
The floor is yours.
Yes, thank you, Jeff Colby, Public Works Director. I do want to introduce the team since we don't all meet with the board too regularly. We have Roby Whitehouse. She's our Waste Management Superintendent. We also have Amanda Lima, our Town Engineer, with us, and Lori Rosala, our Water and Wastewater Superintendent. So that's the current division head team that we have at DPW, and I'll cover the presentation, and if there's any detailed questions that might be better for them to answer, I'll certainly defer to their knowledge on these subjects. So just walking through the presentation, you do have a copy in your packet, but here's our mission statement. We do try to provide and maintain safe infrastructure on a cost-effective basis. That's the gist of our mission. The recap of the highlights for the year, I do like to spend a little time talking about this. This is a format presentation that you've seen previously from other departments, but I think there's been a lot of good things going on in Public Works this year and in the past. I just want to highlight those for you. The first one being the DPW building project that's on schedule and on budget. That should be completed this summer. We're looking at a potential move-in date of May. And so I appreciate the board participating in the groundbreaking ceremony last year. And if COVID slowly fades away, maybe we can have a ribbon cutting ceremony later this year as well. So that's exciting. The Parkers River Bridge project continues. The traffic, as the board knows, or anybody that travels on Route 28 can see, is on the south side on the permanent structure, and the northern side of that structure should be completed and be able to support vehicle traffic before Memorial Day. So that's a good thing as that project continues to move forward. Baxter Gristmill was completed last year. That's a great entity that certainly advertises a nice feature as you enter Yarmouth from the Barnstable side. That was completed. So when COVID does allow, we could do a nice ribbon cutting there as well. So look forward to when we can do things of that nature. The water pump station rehabilitation project was approved. The contract was awarded and the project is underway. That was just phase one. So there are multiple phases of that project, but it'll be significant work done to modernize our well infrastructure for water. It's a huge accomplishment. And then wastewater collection system design funding was approved both last spring's town meeting as well as in the fall. We have moved forward with a contract award for design and survey of some portions of that first phase. So that's exciting work that's continuing. As far as what Public Works does, sometimes people ask questions about what we do and what that looks like for Yarmouth. And so here's just a quick snapshot of the different major public buildings that are maintained, or parks or beaches or active cemeteries, miles of road. Certainly snow and ice is something that we manage. And here's some statistics for the board and the public, both for municipal solid waste as well as construction and demolition material. Both of those saw a decrease, primarily because of COVID, but that is the numbers that we're looking at. Septage also saw a decrease as well. I'm sure with businesses closed and restaurants impacted, there was just less pumping of the septic tanks. Water pumping did increase. I'm sure that had to do with people being home, as well as just a drier season this past year. The first budget, I'll cover these quickly and I'll do them in number order, is facilities. That's fund number 192. There aren't significant changes in any of these budgets we're going to cover tonight, so I will cover them pretty quickly and happy to answer any questions that you might have. But there is a slight decrease in the wages, and that's because we had a long time building and grounds supervisor that retired. There's some restructuring going on within the DPW, and we expect that wage line to go down. Expenses went down slightly as well because of some shift in the custodial expenses, as well as a new contract for custodial services. So with that said, Kyle, we can shift to the next one. This slide I covered already in looking at the numbers. The next fund is trees at 294. This is a budget that we are looking to increase the tree expenses. Over the last couple of years, we've had a $50,000 free cash request that's come in to support tree maintenance. And that's been on a regular basis. So in discussing with the previous town administrator, there's an attempt to build some of that back into the operating budget in a small way. It's not the full $50,000 that we've been seeing in recent years, but at a level of $30,000, building that back into the tree expense to try to manage the tree work within the operating budget rather than continual free cash requests. Other than that, the greenhead fly totals unchanged as it has been in recent years. So essentially that's what that next slide says. And the next budget is Fund 421. That's the DPW admin and engineering budget. The wages is projected to go up slightly. That's not only for contractual increases, but also the assistant DPW director position that the board approved in the fall. This will be no additional headcount within the DPW organization, but will simply be a restructuring, and the cost will be offset by not filling the highway superintendent and building and ground superintendents in the same way. So you'll see that in some of the budgets, and it's a work in progress since we have not filled the assistant DPW director position yet, but hope to do so in the very near future. And the next slide indicates what I just said. So the next budget is Fund 422. That's highway. This budget is on track. That's probably the other thing I should point out in the summary. We're not expecting to go over what we have in this budget. The salaries went down, or the wages went down slightly. Again, that was from a retirement of a long-term highway superintendent and a reorganization within the department. And the expenses are essentially the same. So this slide says what I just mentioned, snow and ice. This is one that everybody is always interested in, especially this time of year. I usually get asked about that and how we're doing. When I put this slide together, we were on track, but we had a couple of snowstorms in February. We've plowed 4 times and had to treat the roads a number of additional times. And so we are approximately $25,000 over budget for this current fiscal year. That's not as significantly over as we've been in other years, and certainly is over the budget compared to last year, where we had a very, very mild year. So what I'd say as far as snow and ice, this was more of a typical year that we had in snow and ice. And because of that, we've slightly exceeded the budget amount. We're proposing to level fund that as we do essentially every year, because as the board knows, this is the one fund that we can legally overspend because we can't predict the weather, and we need to address that. So with that said, this slide just says there's no changes proposed for next year. Sanitation budget, which is Fund 433. This has a slight increase in the wage line. That is related to contractual increases as well as a part-time wage adjustment. The decision was made to make sure that our part-time workers are getting paid at least the minimum wage. And so there was some adjustments that were made within the wages to keep up with that. And the slight increase in expenses is related to the OPEB increase. This budget, as the board knows, is self-supporting, so all of the costs are captured within sanitation, and in order to do so, we need to make sure that we're properly reflecting insurance and OPEB and things of that nature. So this slide essentially says what I just mentioned on the previous. DPW septage, this is Fund 440. Wages are no longer funded out of this budget, so you'll see both this fiscal year and next fiscal year, there's 0 proposed for that. There is a slight change in the expenses, and that again is to make sure that we're capturing all of the insurance costs associated with this enterprise fund. This as well as self-supporting budget, and the insurance costs went up slightly, or are predicted to go up slightly, so that's the increase in the expenses. The next fund is water. That is Fund 450. There is an increase in wages here that is for the same number of personnel within water, but there's some contractual increases for the staff as well as position regrading that was done within the water division. And the expenses are essentially the same. You'll see in your budget books, there was some line item adjustments, some consolidation that was done within the water expenses, but it's essentially the same as in the previous year. And this next slide essentially says what I just told you. The next fund is cemetery. That's Fund 491. Essentially, the wages have a slight increase. Again, it's just contractual, some adjustment to the seasonal wages, just like in sanitation, to make sure that they're at least getting paid the minimum wage. There's increases that are built into the minimum wage going up over the next couple of years, and this reflects that. And then in the expenses, that's essentially flat. And this slide says that. The next fund for DPW is Parks. That's Fund 650. This is one that has a slight increase in wages as well, all related to contractual and the seasonal wage adjustments that I mentioned for the other funds out there. And the expenses are the same as the previous year. And this next slide essentially says that same exact thing I just told you. So one of the things that I've been asked to do is bring up to your attention challenges that are facing Public Works. Some of these you've seen from previous years, but we all know that we have significant water and wastewater projects that are facing us in the future. We are looking to do water infrastructure, water main upgrades when we do the wastewater line installation. So we're looking to combine and get some economies of scale associated with doing both of those utility improvements together, but that we have a significant amount going forward in the near future. The limited options for increasing the cost of wastewater sludge disposal. This is something that in previous years I'd had a much more concern that I brought to the board because we didn't have a long-term contract. At this time, I can happily report that we do have a 3-year contract, but we're heading towards the end of that. And so we need to start looking at what some of our other options are. One of the options that we're exploring, of course, is the anaerobic digester that the board has received updates on previously. That certainly would be a help for controlling costs long-term in that regard. Another item is vehicle maintenance costs. As we're keeping vehicles as a town longer, the cost of vehicle maintenance is going up, and we've had free cash allotments in previous years that have helped offset those costs. Certainly the operating budget can't support these increased vehicle maintenance costs, but the free cash requests have, and they have been able to keep up. So I don't know exactly what is planned for free cash in this upcoming cycle, but certainly vehicle maintenance costs need to be considered. As well as the next item, and that's increasing facility maintenance costs. We see that both HVACs costs as well as generator costs and other mechanical systems are becoming very costly to maintain. It was just 2 summers ago that an unexpected repair to town hall chiller at the HVAC in order to provide air conditioning for town hall cost us approximately $40,000 or just over $40,000. So these are typically unforeseen costs and they can be very expensive to deal with. In fact, one of the articles that I'm sure you'll be talking about in a future meeting is full replacement of the police station HVAC system. And we know that's going to be in the millions of dollars. So, just those facility maintenance costs are very significant. And I would certainly suggest that whenever possible, we try to get those costs built back into the operating budget for these maintenance. If not, we need to continue to have regular free cash requests to make sure that we're able to keep up with our infrastructure. With that said, the next slide is recommendations to consider in order to address these challenges. Certainly a wastewater enterprise fund would be one way to help have a place to park some of those funds related to wastewater. You'll probably hear from our finance team a little bit more about that in the future. This isn't something that we're looking to necessarily do for the spring town meeting, but maybe the fall town meeting, we would look to set up that fund. This is a place you could park the short-term rental money as well as any other wastewater funds that would need a place. The WIF that's going to be voted on at the ballot could certainly, those source of funds could be placed in the enterprise fund. And again, it's establishing that mechanism that then will demonstrate the support and maintenance of wastewater. So similar to the water fund or septic fund, it can be a self-supporting fund. I'd also recommend that the town look at some point the sanitation enterprise fund, doing a very similar kind of self-supporting enterprise fund associated with sanitation. In practice, that's a division that is self-supporting, but the enterprise fund would help demonstrate that. The increase in vehicle maintenance budgets, as I mentioned before, is something that certainly should be taken a look at. We can't support all of the vehicle costs out of the operating budget. And I think another way that we could explore to help contain some of these costs would be to centralize those repair costs and that oversight. And with the new DPW building and the 4 full new maintenance bays, I think that's a good opportunity to take a look at that centralizing of that maintenance operation and potentially do it out of that new state-of-the-art facility. Another recommendation is to increase the facility maintenance budget. Again, we have some very expensive costs in maintaining our aging buildings, and we want to make sure that we're able to properly do so. So when we're able to do so, I would suggest putting some of those costs back into the operating budget in order to support that. With that said, the next couple of slides I have are capital requests. We can probably scroll through those pretty quickly, Kyle. I don't think that's the subject of the meeting tonight, but when I made this almost exact same presentation to the Finance Committee, they did want to spend a little time talking about some of those capital items. So I kept it in there, but we don't need to talk about that necessarily tonight. I know you have a public hearing coming up about those items in the very near future, later this month, I believe. So the free cash requests, again, these capture the things I talked about earlier in the presentation that I think we don't want to lose track of. We certainly have significant vehicle and maintenance costs we need to make sure we capture. There is a cost associated with the town hall roof replacement. Capital Budget Committee is aware of this, and this does appear on their list. I only mention this in here because when Dan Knappich was here, there was a strong interest to upgrade the solar array on town hall, and the town hall roof would need to be replaced in order to do so. So because of that, that's a potential item for free cash here. Also don't want to forget about the tree maintenance costs, although I am proposing to increase the operating budget by $30,000. That's still not the full $50,000 we've been seeing recurring in previous years. So we might have a small amount of tree maintenance that might still need to be subject to free cash requests. And of course, wastewater planning, depending on what happens with the DHY and moving forward, we will need to have some wastewater planning funds to continue those discussions. This is outside of the design funds that have been appropriated for phase 1 for collection system. This would continue our discussion about land use controls. We'd be able to finish up the notice of project change, which formally changes the permit for our wastewater master plan, some fertilizer education. Of course, we need to continue to support RAC as well as DHY, and water quality monitoring, which is ongoing and will be ongoing throughout our plan, has typically been funded out of our planning funds. And any other outreach that's necessary would need to come out of that as well. So just some topics that we need to keep in mind as we move forward. With that said, I do always like to end on a positive note, and the positive note is the revenues. While we do see a number of these categories, we had a decrease. I think the decrease that we saw in FY20, at least in the revenues related to DPW, weren't as significant as they could have been. The beach receipts was down approximately 15%, but I think a large part of that is related to the late opening and the late collection of the beaches because of kind of phasing in after COVID initially hit. If we open up on time this year, I expect the beaches to still be a very good revenue producer this year because it's something outside that people can do. Sanitation saw an overall 4% decrease, which was both a decrease in the sticker sales as well as construction and demolition and other bulky items that are revenue sources coming in, but not as significant as we anticipated. Septage was also down, as I mentioned before, probably because of just impact on businesses and homeowners because of COVID. And water increased. So these are all good, healthy numbers as far as the overall revenues are for DPW, and I just wanted to share that that information with the board. With that said, I know I covered a lot of these topics very quickly, but happy to answer any questions the board might have or dive any deeper into some of these topics if you'd like.
That's great. Thanks, Jeff. Appreciate your presentation. I'm going to start off with board questions. I'll start off with Dan Horgan.
Good presentation, Jeff. No questions. Thank you.
Mike Stone.
You're muted, Mike.
Thank you, Tracy.
I wasn't going to tell you. Nobody else is jumping in. I don't know
I'll
why.
remember that. You talked about the sludge waste disposal contract coming to an end. I don't know how close we are to the end, but have you done any kind of preliminary searching around for a new contract, and what kind of, at least in a broad sense, what kind of increases can we anticipate?
That's a good question. We have a vendor that we're using now. This is also another topic that kind of bothers me on a core level, because where we're disposing of that is it's hauled to a landfill in New York. And there just seems to me that there must be a better way to deal with these sludges, and in a more cost-effective way. So we're seeing this 3-year contract that we have that's got about a year or so left on it, has some built-in cost increases. So even though we believe this particular vendor will want to extend, that cost is only going to keep going up. And like I said, it goes to a landfill, and there seems to be, there's technology out there, there's opportunities out there where we could use this material more as a resource and have a better kind of beneficial use for it versus just burying it in the ground. So this is one of the things we are continuing to work on. And even though our contract was only for 3 years, we do expect that we'll be able to continue with this vendor, but we are quickly approaching $200 a ton for disposal, and we need to turn that around.
I remember when we had that Covanta contract, in terms of the solid waste being hauled away, there was, at the expiration of the initial contract, there was quite a significant increase because of the longevity of the contract. This is a short term, 3 years is not a very long contract, and yet there seems to be an expectation that there'll be significant increases. So that's the concern that I wanted you to address, if you could. The other comment I'll make is, I could be wrong. Ed's not on, is he? But I think when we budgeted, we were figuring a downfall or decrease in revenues across the board is somewhere in the neighborhood of 30 to 33%. So your figures, although they're down a little bit, were pretty impressive in view of the climate that we're operating in. Do you have any explanation why they were so good, or how surprised were you by that?
Yeah, I was pleasantly surprised. Like I said in the presentation, I wanted to end on kind of a high note. I know that was a decrease, but it, like you said, it certainly wasn't anywhere near what we were expecting. And I would expect that, being open a little bit longer on the beach season this year, if we open up on time and accepting, parking receipts on time, we'll see that even increase a little bit more. So I think that was good. I think sanitation probably continued to have reasonable numbers because people are still, working on their house. They might be, I've heard different things about contractors being busy because of home improvements, and certainly construction and demolition material is a big part of the cost equation, the revenue equation at sanitation. So that still remained relatively reasonable. But yes, I would say pleasantly surprised. I certainly expected a bigger drop.
All right, thank you. That's all I have right now.
Thanks, Mike. Eric, do you have any questions or comments at all? DPW?
I don't have any questions. I'd just like to say, Jeff, thank you for a clear and concise and brief presentation. You've got a lot to deal with there, and I think that you put it in a way that's very understandable for us. My one comment is, more philosophical in nature than anything else, but I think the theme of the increases that we saw presented by Jeff was, wages and contractual obligations. And we're going to have another agenda item tonight that is going to have, not immediate budget implications, but certainly significant budget implications for the future. And I think that seeing that for most of our departmental presentations, that wages and contractual obligations are what make up most of the budget increases, we need to be aware of what the decisions we make today have not only the impact on today, but also when these contracts come due or these grants come due, and it's something we're going to struggle with, and again, purely philosophical in nature, but something we need to keep in mind moving forward as we deal with wages and contractual obligations. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric. Tracy.
Well, I got to take the opportunity to point out, after yesterday being International Women's Day, that you bring a team of leadership in the DPW department of 3 women, which I think is remarkable. 3 qualified women. So having Lori, Amanda, and Roby all on your side, I think is a wonderful thing. So thank you for that. Overall, I mean, you have a lot of different departments under your purview, so to speak, Jeff. So there's a lot of changes this year, in and outs, but overall the budget is pretty much in line. So nothing major. You talked about some of your challenges. I didn't hear anything about the recycling costs. I know we had been dealing with some very high recycling costs in the past. I'm just wondering what the market is on that, what you project for sticker fees to be able to, as you said, a lot of these budgets are self-sustaining. So I'm sure that that's all part of the plan, not just the expenses, but the income.
Yeah, I'll start to answer that question, then I'll defer a lot of the details to Roby, who's much more in touch with those markets. I think we've generally seen some of the recycling markets stabilize a little bit, but on the other part of your question, we're definitely pay very close attention to construction and demolition revenue, because as I think I've mentioned to the board before, that offsets the cost of the stickers to the residents. So if we see a significant drop in that revenue item, that puts more pressure on the sticker cost, and we would need to revisit that sooner. Right now, I think we're in a pretty good place. We need to keep a close eye on the revenue to make sure it doesn't drop too much more, or we might need to revisit that sticker number sooner. But with that said, I defer to Roby with regards to the individual recycling markets.
Roby.
Thank you, Jeff, and thank you, Mark, and Board of Selectmen for allowing me to be here this evening. Tracy, that's an excellent question. Recycling markets have changed over the past 5 years dramatically, and it's been a roller coaster ride. And the market that is currently at the worst case scenario is plastics. We have been sending all of our commingled, which is our metal, our tin cans, our glass, and our plastic recyclables to E.L. Harvey. And included in that fee that they charge us is the transportation fee, because they come to us and pick up that product. We have been paying $100 a ton. The contamination in those loads, we have worked hard to reduce the contamination, but the markets keep changing, and the DEP keeps talking to us and explaining to us what should be in those loads. And we reach out and we put signs out to educate the public about what is recyclable, but certainly that is a big challenge. On the other side of that, paper products were costing money 2 years ago. The paper recycling stream is now profitable. So cardboard is currently at $90 a ton rebate to the town of Yarmouth. Mixed paper is still costing $20 a ton, but that's offset, in my opinion, by the cost, the rebate back for newspaper, because the town of Yarmouth separated newspaper from mixed paper and brought the money back in again. So we've done a lot to really create different streams that will allow the town to have a slight amount of income to offset some of the expenses. But again, plastic is definitely the big concern these days, and we're all very conscientious of what we put into it. And our team has worked very hard to place education signs and billboards up. And it's a challenge, but I don't think it's a challenge that anyone else is experiencing more than Yarmouth or less than Yarmouth. We're all experiencing it. But to your point, the cost is there. We have used RDP funds, the DEP grants that comes in every year. We did use some of those funds 2 years ago to assist us with paying for the recycled plastic that goes to E.L. Harvey. Last year we were tight, but we managed to maintain. We are doing okay this year and sustaining, and we hope to continue. But obviously reducing the amount of plastics that contaminate the loads would be helpful as well.
Okay, so you don't foresee any extreme spike in, I mean, obviously the market fluctuates, but I guess in terms of budget planning, it's difficult.
It is difficult. You're absolutely right, Tracy. And as more people have been at home, there's obviously, we're seeing a different shift in the waste that comes in. But our team works, like I said, very hard to maintain the commingled loads to hopefully reduce the contamination. And that's when the prices start going up. As a matter of fact, when the last bill came in from E.L. Harvey, they did charge us $95 a ton. So they are recognizing that the town of Yarmouth is working hard to reduce contamination. There's some pretty strange things that people think are recyclable. We call it wish cycling. I won't go into it. There's some interesting stuff.
I wish I could back up and put it in the right container, but I'm just going to put it here. Okay, so it's, I guess, to our best assumptions. So the C&D down 6%, did that, you believe, have anything to do with, the scale was closed for a short period of time as well, wasn't it? Due to COVID?
It was actually down because we had computer issues. It did start off that we had to close it because we had an open window in a situation where no one was wearing masks. Absolutely. But during that same process, we had computer issues that caused the scale to go down. The scale was down, we lost credit cards, and we also lost the network. So yeah, we had a multitude of issues that caused it to be down for, I believe, 2 months.
Okay.
And that definitely reduced our income.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think in comparison to having those issues, I think only a 6% reduction is pretty amazing, to Mike's point. So, well, thank you very much for your presentation, detailed as always, and I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Tracy. In terms of my questions, I'd like to follow up a little bit on Mike's observation about sludge. And looking ahead, Jeff, has there been any discussion among the towns about collaborating or working with the county to collaborate on how to deal with this challenge involving sludge waste and disposal?
Yeah, absolutely. The county's looking at a couple of different studies currently related to solid waste, and this is in the mix. The sludge that I'm concerned about in the septage report is wastewater sludges, but there's also an organic material associated with food wastes that needs to be considered here as well. Like I mentioned before, and I think the board has heard, there's definitely some very promising possibilities with the anaerobic digester. And even if it's not located in Yarmouth, just locating it somewhere, within a reasonable distance for Barnstable County communities to participate in would be key. I think that would be a good reuse of that material. So yes, we are regularly interacting with our peers in other communities and the county to try to see what options might be available to us.
When are we likely to see some recommendations in terms of what some of our future options might be? You mentioned a county study, county analysis. When is that likely to unfold with some recommendations?
Yeah, they should have some recommendations for us this summer or early fall, I think is a tentative timeframe for some of those things. And hopefully we'll be in a better place with our ongoing discussions with the AD potential here in Yarmouth as well.
Okay. I appreciate that. The other comment that I want to make is I noticed in our briefing materials, Laurie had sort of highlighted the issue of PFAS, this contaminant that we've been reading about in the last couple of days in the Boston Globe and in the Cape Cod Times. And I'm glad, Laurie, you gave us a briefing on that. I very much appreciate that, because there are residents in Yarmouth that are concerned, might there be a potential groundwater contamination or water supply contamination issue here in Yarmouth. And I'd just like you to address that so that for the people that are watching and paying attention, you can share with them what you shared with us in terms of the sampling that's going on in town.
Sure. So I just wanted to give you guys just kind of the heads up that the sampling was coming, so that if we do have any kind of positive results that or negative, poor results, that you would know in advance and be prepared. Basically, we're testing for a group of chemicals known as PFAS, PFAS. They're perfluoridated alkyl substances, and they're a group of substances that is pretty much ubiquitous. It's in Teflon, it's in anything waterproof, it's in firefighting materials. So it's in a lot of different products that we use every day. But Mass DEP recently came out with a new regulation for PFAS in drinking water. And because of that, Yarmouth will be testing for PFAS in drinking water in April. The testing, the results can take up to a month or more to get back from the lab. So we won't have any results probably till May at the earliest. And hopefully we will not have to worry about it. But I know there's a lot of concern because Hyannis has that problem and we're very close to Hyannis. So our wells aren't really too close to that part of town. So hopefully we will avoid that plume that they hit. Theirs was more a result of being near the firefighting training facility as well as the airport. But we luckily don't have any big known issues in town like that. So hopefully we will be okay. The biggest potential concern for us would be more what's leaching from septic systems. Another good reason to look for approving the sewer system that we're working on right now. So that's just the general gist of what we're doing, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
If board members don't have any questions on the PFAS and the water sampling, then seeing none, Lori, thank you. Thank you very much. And I don't have anything else to add. I think there's just this ongoing concern by board members regarding some of these big picture issues. So I think the updates on recycling, sludge, and some of what's happening in the markets, I think has all been a big help. So thank you for enlightening us and helping us understand what's going on. So unless there's anything else, I think that concludes this section of the agenda. And we're now ready to move on to the Fire Safer Grant review and possible vote.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Jeff.
The fire chief and the deputy chief should be available.
Okay, we see.
Oh, and I see one of them anyway. Yep, I see the chief. So.
There we go. Chief.
Good evening. Can you hear me okay?
We can hear you just fine. Thank you.
Okay.
The floor is yours.
Okay, great. We have some slides that we generated as of the last time we met with regards to the SAFER grant and the hiring of potentially the 4 additional firefighters. As we said before, the SAFER grant is now 100% for salaries and benefits for 3 years. The application is completed and awaiting approval from the board before we submit. We're ready to go. The deputy worked really hard on it and got it all done. Very timely. Can we get that slide back up, Kyle? There we go. Thank you, sir. So the total grant request that we're going to submit is $1,221,778.68. That's for the 4. That's for salaries and benefits for 3 years, fully funded for the SAFER grant. So after the grant expires, we come up with some options. We estimate $141,000 in overtime savings, which will shift towards salaries to help offset the costs. There's also, we do an annual ambulance services cost reporting, and finance does that. Richmond Avenue did it prior. I believe Maria's doing it now. And if Ed, you're on the line, correct me if I'm wrong. That's a Medicare adjustment. that we receive. Then that's estimated to be about 94,000. And we're looking to increase the ambulance fees, 229,880, which sounds like a lot, but we have the comparisons to show you and the modest increases for each individual call to equate to that 229,880. Below is just some comparisons where we are at the 950 currently that's a basic life support call. So that's not advanced life support, which is the next call, which is more paramedic intervention, more IV and cardiac monitoring, oxygen therapy. Those are the higher priorities of the ALS calls. The BLS is more of the falls, the back injuries, things like that don't require a lot of ALS intervention. But as you can see at 950, there's departments that are less than us. There's departments that are higher than us. So we do have room to increase that. It's the same on the ALS level at 1129. We're actually the lowest in that one comparison right there. We have another sheet that shows how we compare on the other departments on the Cape further in the presentation. Next slide, please.
Chief?
Yes,
Can I
Devin.
just mention something that was provided by Coastal Billing, and all those clients are Cape Towns. That's the most current information we have. So the next one will, as you'll see, the last one comes from Eastham's comparisons that they did. But go ahead.
Thank you, Deputy. So next slide, here's a snapshot of the current ambulance fees. And this was based on 4,100 transports to the hospital. Last year's data, the 2020 is a little bit less than the 4,100 because obviously the COVID problem, we did have a decrease in the run volume by about 400 calls roughly. But we anticipate that to go back up as things open up again and the motels and restaurants and the summer cottages all get full. Hopefully after COVID, our volume will increase back up to the normal level. So we'll see an increase in those transports. Sorry about the radio in the background. Hyannis has something going on next door we're monitoring. So as you can see, that shows Medicare, Medicaid, HMO, and private pay. So private insurance. It shows BLS, ALS rate, and the totals down the bottom reflect on what we bill out. And the 1875. So the potential is the 2.2, but we collected the 1875. Next slide. So we can't plan on gaining on Medicare and Medicaid. They're going to pay what they're going to pay. The only places that we would benefit from is what's highlighted in yellow. So that's on the private pay and the HMO, the other insurances. By increasing those rates there, that's where our collections would come from to fund the new personnel. The Medicare, Medicaid is going to stay the same. Regardless of what we bill them, they're going to pay what they pay. Okay, next slide. Now, this is a comparison that we got. The deputy actually got this from Eastham. They did within the last 3 years. And as you can see, Yarmouth is at the top. We're at 950 and 1129. So there's several departments on the Cape here that are significantly higher than us, and there's a few that are lower than us. Dennis, Chatham, and Mashpee are lower than us. So we do have room. We're not going to be the highest department charging for ambulance by any means. We're going to be more in the middle of the pack. Currently, there are, on the BLS side, there are 7 departments that are higher than us currently. And by going up to what we propose to the 1200, that'll put us around the middle of the pack. On the ALS side, there's actually 10 departments higher than us. As you can see, Chatham is lower at 772. And even at us going up to the 1800 for the ALS call, we're still going to be about the middle of the pack. And it's the same for the mileage as well. So that's how we propose to fund the positions once the grant expires. And that's the last slide we have. Thank you for your time tonight, and I'll certainly entertain any questions. The deputy chief is on as well.
That's great. Thanks, Chief.
Could I just throw out that Ed had jumped in, when you do the reimbursement annually that we do, by increasing our rates, we will see an increase in that formula that finance does for us, that Maria does. So that will go up slightly.
The Medicare reimbursement, the 90
Yes.
pounds.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Before I hear from the board, let me just ask Bob or Ed if there's any comments that they would like to add that we should be briefed on. Bob?
I don't have anything specifically. I think the chief and the deputy did what the board asked for, is to try to look at estimated incomes and how they could be increased so that in year 4, there will not be a big impact on the tax rate or any other town funds. And I think they've done that, which is significant. Our job is to make sure that those increased funds are put aside so they can be used in year 4 of this proposal, which I think we can do. And Ed could explain, I think, some of the ways that can happen.
Ed, you want to take a minute just to reassure us that we'll be able to capture all this?
Yeah, and what I would say is that we wouldn't wait until year 3 to actually increase the insurance rates. By year 3, we'll be even farther behind probably some of these other communities. What we may want to do is increase the rates now. We can, that money would then go to free cash, and we can decide what to do with that. That could help out with our handling some of the items that we want to do with capital and some other different types of things. And we may want to also, as the economy improves, to increase the tax rate. I know what we want to do is prioritize the roads within the levy, but we may want to, instead of in 1 year, 3 years from now, increase the tax rate. We don't know what that's going to look like. So if we have an opportunity when the economy improves, we may want to just ease up to that level and then just steward that money. And then, you know, by the time we're in year 4, everything will be in great shape in order to finance this. And we do have a decrease in ambulance funds. So the increase now would be helpful.
Okay. All right. Let me go to the board for questions or comments. I'm going to start with Eric. Eric Tolley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Chief. Thank you, Deputy. You know, my only suggestion, you know, looking at the numbers, you know, it looks like there's a cost of in year 4, or maybe not in year 4, but at today's costs, you know, approximately 300,000 per firefighter. You know, if we do some simple math and divide 1.2 by 4, you know, we have the 141 estimated overtime savings and the 230 in increased ambulance fees. You know, my only comment would be 2 things. Number one, if we are inclined to do this, number one, start increasing the ambulance fees now. And number 2, you know, rather than taking in the revenue and kicking it into free cash and then deciding what to do with it, I wonder if we could set up a, you know, an EMS stabilization fund to, you know, earmark these monies so that they, I want to use a word that I shouldn't, but let's just say that they won't be dipped into if the need arises. I'd like to see it sit somewhere and be available for year 4 rather than be faced with having to, you know, put them into free cash. So those are my only comments. Start the ambulance increases immediately, and then perhaps establish some kind of stabilization fund if we're able to do that, so that these monies can sit there and be available for future use for this specific purpose.
That's great. That's an excellent point.
Mr. Chairman, if I might.
Can you respond to that, Ed?
Yes, Eric, the $1.2 million you saw was for all of the firefighters over the 3 years.
Okay.
So the per year amount is $433,000. as opposed to $1.2 million or 300,000 per firefighter. So it's a much more modest number. And I think utilizing the funding plan, there won't be a big cliff where we need to generate a lot of money. That's why, and I totally agree that we need to increase the ambulance fees immediately, review them again in 3 years, but we should be able to ease into the 100% funding without necessarily having to sequester any money.
Is there, thank you, Ed, is there anything that prevents us from establishing some sort of stabilization fund for use by the fire department for this specific purpose, or other purposes that may arise if we should find out that there are excess monies in the future?
No, and I think what you could probably do is put it into the ambulance reserve for appropriation, not create a brand new fund, not have a stabilization fund where it takes a 2/3 vote to move the money out of it. So if you choose, that's where it could go. We're still, going to be crawling out of a pretty, difficult economy. So, whatever we can do to, just even fund the existing firefighters and some of their capital needs and some of their facilities needs is going to be important, I think, over the next 3 years. So, but whatever the board might chooses, but I would just put it in the ambulance RFA, just so it's actually easier to utilize to pay for things.
Can you remind me, Ed, of what the ambulance RFA funds are currently used for?
Sure, that's used for capital. The fire capital all comes out of that fund, and the subsidizing of the overtime or the fire salaries come out of that fund as well.
Okay. Yeah, my concern is just, commingling of funds that are meant to be allocated for different purposes. Personally, I like to keep things separate, but if it's cumbersome to establish some sort of stabilization fund, and it gives us more flexibility to put it in the ambulance RFA, then I'd be fine with that.
Very good. Thanks, Eric. Tracy?
Yes, thank you. I'm not sure we're projecting properly because the number that we're looking at for the budget increase is going to increase by that number 2.5% every year. So while it may cover us the first year, subsequent years, it won't, unless we continue to raise fees or find a substitute in terms of funding. So it's what we're looking at is kind of linear, where we'll be we'll cover the fourth year based on those fees. Did your fee projection take out the percentage for the service that the ambulance collection provides? There's a percentage.
The
ambulance.
annual increase?
The billing company takes a percentage.
Yes.
What
So
is that?
that's funded out of our expense line, not out of the RFA.
Right, but the increases to your ambulance fees, a percentage of that will be earmarked or have to go to the billing service as well. So I just want to make sure you calculated that in as part of the offset to any increase, because whatever we raise it, some of that percentage will go to pay that service.
Correct. Yeah, I would anticipate a small increase in our line item on the expense side to pay for the coastal ambulance fees.
Okay, just making sure we thought about that as well. Again, I do think we're prepared for the fourth year doing this. I'm not sure how we're going to plan to cover the contractual obligations and increases that going forward from that. So I think we need to think about it. I definitely think putting it into the RFA makes sense. Every fee should be associated with a service. So I think all ambulance fees, all of it should go in there. But I do think that, if we look at the survey of what's been many, many years in the making. We have made small progress, and I know that this has been something that's been on the agenda. And if we can get a grant for it, and we're gonna be able to offset it, I think it's a no-brainer. So I'm very much in favor of moving forward with this. And I thank you for your work on that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tracy. Mike Stone?
The question I have is, in terms of these proposed increases in the cost of the ambulance service, are private insurance companies, I'm not talking about Medicaid and Medicare, because those are government fixed numbers for reimbursement, but are they going to be pretty much covered by conventional insurance, or is there going to be a shortfall to the patient based on what you're projecting these increases to be initially?
Yeah, the private pay will cover the majority of it, and they're going to cover, like, the HMO will pay 100%. I think Medicare, Medicaid only does 80% on that reimbursement, and it's 80% of what they allow to pay, which is much less than what.
Right, which is a lot more than.
Right.
20% off the top is more like 50 or 60.
Yeah, and that's why we're targeting just the private pay insurance and the HMO, because we're not going to get more out of Medicare or Medicaid.
But that's not going to result in overwhelming or very large uninsured portions for the policyholders. The reason I ask that question is I remember when the town didn't bill at all for ambulance services. And it was brought to the attention of the voters that, hey, the money's there, insurance companies will pay this. Why don't we, institute these charges and get that revenue that we're not getting? The concern of the people that were opposed to that were that elderly people in particular might not call the ambulance if they were afraid they were going to get stuck with a big bill. That's the context in which I'm asking this question. And the answer at that meeting was, oh, don't worry about it. We're just going to take the insured portion. We're not going to worry about the balance. So the first question I have, you started the answer, I don't know if you've concluded with your answer or not, is, are we going to expect larger uninsured portions of the bill based on these increases or not? And secondly, what's the current, and you have to refresh my memory on this, I know it was discussed previously, but what's the current policy on billing for the uninsured balance?
We don't chase, we don't go to collections currently. On those, we write off a lot of stuff. If there's a hardship, especially a Yarmouth taxpayer submits a hardship, we look at it very seriously and we abate the hardship on that instance. So I don't see, and the majority of the elderly population have Medicare, Medicaid. So we're only going to get, like I said, what we're going to get from that.
Yeah, those are fixed. Yeah, you can't really do much.
So it's really the people that have regular insurance, which are generally the younger population that has regular insurance, is really what we're targeting.
And you expect that those increases will get absorbed in the HMO plans?
Yes.
Okay. The other question I have is, Ed, overall, what's your opinion as to the viability of this issue in terms of taking advantage of the SAFER grant? And are we going to be able to comfortably support those additional personnel in year 4 going forward?
Yeah, if what we do is we, again, increase the insurance rates now, we can see what that impact is on our revenues. Then in 3 years, we could look at it again. I'm not saying that we'll increase it, but we'll benchmark it again. And I just want to respond to the deputy mentioned this as well. We gave him the updated information. I think it was before this presentation. He may not have seen it, but we received $202,000. Maria, it's a very complicated, lengthy form. We were able in Yarmouth to automate, the process of doing that. And so has that been done on the fire side as well. So Maria with the deputy worked together, and this year in June, we'll get $202,000 from additional Medicare because they're not covering 100%
of the bill. So when we increase the insurance rates and we do this application for the additional Medicare reimbursement, that amount will go up along with the receipts that we'll get from the other folks. There is, in the fourth year, a need to increase the taxes. So if we can actually ramp that up, what we did the last time around was we increased the taxes before the SAFER grant. This is not the economy to do that. And what we might need to do, because we don't know what the economy is going to be in 4 years, we may want to incrementally add a little bit more out of the tax levy to the fire department budget, understanding that we also want to, put the $1.5 million in capital back in, and we want to put the roadway funding back in. So we need to measure, what is important in terms of which items we put back into the levy. But, I wouldn't want to say, okay, 4 years from now, let's just go increase the taxes, because we don't know what that's going to look like in 4 years.
Yeah. Okay, and my last comment is, like Tracy, this has been a long time in coming, and as long as it's something that Ed thinks is overall viable, I'd be in support of it as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great, thanks, Mike. Dan Horgan.
Gentlemen, I'm grateful for the preparation. You've done a great job, Chief, Deputy Chief Ed. I also am supportive. I think it addresses some of the overtime issues short term. It maybe helps us out a little bit with the injuries. And it fulfills what the requirements of the study that came out in terms of size of department. So I think it's just a great opportunity that came around at the exact time that we needed it. I'm particularly grateful for the financial planning that's going into this to help soften the blow on year 4. I'm curious, are the equipment costs and everything included as part of the grant, or is that something separate?
So the grant's covering the salaries and the benefits.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll have to cover the equipment costs, which is the fire gear. But we did receive a grant under the assistance to firefighters for protective clothing. And so we'll fund it out of that. And the other costs are we have in our expense line, which is for a physical. And the academy cost is built into this as well, the $250 a week that they get supplemental of their salary to go to the fire academy for 9 weeks. That's built into this as well.
At one point, we talked about, is it possible to have some kind of contractual arrangement with new hires that, should they leave within a certain period of time, that we recoup those costs? Has any work been done to research that issue?
We've researched it with other departments, and certainly the next round of negotiations, I wouldn't be opposed of bringing that up as a topic for discussion. Absolutely.
Okay. As Selectman Stone mentioned, I was concerned about what happens to the people who can't afford it, but it seems like you've taken good care to make sure that you're not overwhelming people who really can't afford the rates that we're charging. So great job. I'm supportive, and I hope that the increase in fire personnel really helps us long-term in terms of health and safety for the entire department. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's great. Thank you, Dan. Well,
I'll make a motion.
to go right ahead.
Make a motion that we approve the signing and the processing of the SAFER grant as proposed.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Do we have any discussion? Hearing none. Bob.
The
go
only
ahead.
question, Chief, is that what you need, Deputy, to file the application? Do you need a vote of the board in any other form, or is this sufficient to file with the application?
This would be good. The last grant, we needed a letter from the board. This grant is not required. So
But we'll have the vote, and you'll include that anyway.
yes, thank you for the support.
Thank you, Mr.
Okay, thanks, Bob. All right, this is a roll call vote. Tracy Post,
Aye.
Mike Stone,
Aye.
Dan Horgan,
Aye.
Eric Tolley,
Aye.
Mark Forrest votes aye. It's unanimous. Thank you, gentlemen. Good
Thank you
luck.
very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Very good. Next item on the agenda is the police patrol contract vote. And we're gonna bring up the police chief. Kyle. And I don't know if the deputy's with him tonight, but good evening, Chief Frederickson.
Good evening. Everybody doing good tonight?
Yeah, we're doing great. Are you doing solo tonight?
The deputy is going to be on. He's probably listening.
Okay.
So he may jump on here.
Okay, very good. The floor is yours.
Okay. We're here tonight to go over what we talked about regarding the patrol officer contract. We've gone through this at the executive committee. It was a favorable vote, so now it's being brought before you as a public vote. No significant changes with the contract was reviewed by town council. Several comments were made, most of which almost all of them were really not the meat and potatoes of what the contract was about. Some minor language pieces, but really insignificant. I discussed it with interim manager Bob Lawton today, and I think we're in good shape.
Okay. Very good. Do any board members have any questions?
I have a comment. My understanding, Bob, correct me if I'm wrong, on the response from town council, I think one of the issues was, or the main issue was, there was a difference between the language in the contract and the memorandum of understanding, and they wanted to conform the language in the memorandum of understanding with the drafted language in the contract, so there's no confusion on interpretation going forward. Wasn't that really the main point of this?
Yes, sir. And I think the both the chief and the deputy have resolved those. And I think, Chief, you can speak to that.
Yeah, that was done. Thanks to Deputy Chief Lennon. He worked hard because, as any of you have been involved in contract negotiations, sometimes you put wording down and it may conflict. And then when you actually put it into the contract, it may impact other sections of the contract. So there could be some tweaks here and there that have to be made. And it wouldn't surprise me that once we put the final sandpaper on this contract, there'll be a couple of words that might have to change, but nothing that would cause any renegotiation or impact or anything. You know, for example, there's a recommendation in there at one section, you know, people are referred to as officers, and the next section it says members. So it's rather the minutia of some of the detail, but the MOU, which is also a fluid document, it's not, it can never be 100% exact, but we corrected those things thanks to Deputy Chief Lennon. So the MOU represents all of the significant changes within the contract.
And if you vote to approve the contract tonight, it would be subject to a final drafting by council and with approval of the union. So you can approve it tonight based upon my understanding of the work that the chief and the deputy chief have done with bargaining labor council. So I think, as far as I'm concerned, you are free to do that with the comfort level that it has been totally reviewed and it matches what the MOU says on both sides of the table.
None of the wording changes the context of anything within it, though.
No, my understanding is no. I think the chief can verify that.
Yeah, no, not at all. As a matter of fact, I have one of the negotiators sitting here next to me. So he's appraised of everything, and it really doesn't. I mean, it's ready to go to print and for signature.
Very good. So do we have a motion to approve the contract?
Make a motion based on Bob's comments that we approve it based on final review from special town council and approval of the union. I do want to put in there though, if it changes the context of anything significant, that it needs to come back to our board for
Yes.
review.
That makes sense.
Just for the record, the union has already ratified it.
The changed version?
Yeah, it really didn't change from what they ratified, and the wording, the small wordings don't change any of the things that were negotiated.
So you may want to, just a suggestion, Tracy, it would be subject to minor adjustments recommended by town council.
In language.
That's what I
I
said.
think that's what, yeah, that's what I thought.
Well done.
That's what I got.
I did.
I think if I could, Mr. Chairman, I think
Yes.
Tracy, you mentioned about changes in context, and I think it perhaps would be better to say, providing there's no substantive changes,
Okay.
because I think that's what you intended to say, you know.
Correct.
Very good.
Okay, and with that change, I'll second it.
Okay, is there any more discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for a roll call vote. Tracy Post,
Aye.
Eric Tolley,
Aye.
Mike Stone,
Aye.
and Dan Horgan.
Aye.
And Mark Forrest votes aye. Carries unanimously. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chief, Deputy Chief, thank you.
All right. You have a good night.
You too.
All right, the next item on the agenda is we're on to board and committee actions. The first item is committee appointments. I'm going to turn this portion over to Mr. Horgan. Looks like you have a slew of appointments for us.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My first recommendation is to appoint Mr. Louis Alberti as the town of Yarmouth representative to the Tony Kent Arena Board. The appointment's for a 3-year term and will run through March.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
I'll second for discussion.
Okay, then discussion. So we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Eric?
So having been a past member of this board, I know that it is comprised of both town representatives and user group representatives. And this particular person is the DY hockey coach. And I think there's an inherent conflict between someone who's acting on behalf of the town's best interest and someone who's acting on behalf of a user group, which this person clearly is. So, you know, based on my perception of what that conflict might be, I cannot support this appointee or recommended appointee.
This gentleman's already on the board.
Is this a reappointment?
Well, no, see, that's what I was wondering. I was wondering if he was moving from potentially
I
a
think you're
user
right,
group.
Tracy. I think he is on the board, but under a different capacity.
Correct. That's what I was gonna say.
Is he currently under a user group representative?
I think he's actually president.
He's what?
I think he's actually the president of the board.
In what capacity is he acting? As a town representative or as a user group representative?
I apologize. I really don't have that information. I can
Would you like to
certainly
withdraw this one?
I can
Mr.
withdraw this and get some further information for you.
I think that might
It would be my recommendation that if he's currently representing a user group, that's where he should stay, because like I said, he is the hockey coach. And you know, I think there's an inherent conflict there.
Okay. Yeah, I'm happy to withdraw it.
Okay,
I'll bring it back another time.
okay. So the
Okay,
motion
that brings us to the next
item.
recommendation, which is to appoint Mr. Joseph Baker as a regular member of the Town of Yarmouth Library Planning Committee. This appointment is for a 3-year term and will run through February 2024.
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay. Motion and second. Do we have any discussion? Hearing none. Roll call vote. All those in favor say aye. Dan Horgan,
Aye.
Tracy Post,
Aye.
Mike Stone,
Aye.
Eric Tolley,
Aye.
Forrest votes aye. Next one, please.
My next recommendation is to appoint Miss Mary Johnson as a regular member to the Town of Yarmouth Community Housing Committee. This appointment is for a 3-year term and will run through January 2024.
So moved.
I'll second. Okay, any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, roll call vote, Dan Horgan,
Aye.
Tracy Post,
Aye.
Mike Stone,
Aye.
Eric Tolley,
Aye.
chair votes aye. Guys, next item.
The next recommendation is to reappoint Miss Abigail Santos as a regular member to the Town of Yarmouth Recycling and Solid Waste Advisory Committee. This appointment for.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, roll call vote, Dan Horgan,
Aye.
Tracy Post,
Aye.
Mike Stone,
Aye.
Eric Tolley,
Aye.
chair votes aye. Next item.
Next, Mr. Chairman, we have a recommendation to appoint Robert C. Lawton Jr. as a regular member to the Affordable Housing Trust. This appointment is for a 2-year term to run through March 2023.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, roll call vote, Dan Horgan,
Aye.
Tracy Post,
Aye.
Mike Stone,
Aye.
Eric Tolley,
Aye.
Forrest votes aye. Next one.
Next, Mr. Chairman, we have a recommendation to reappoint Mr. Dick Martin and Ms. Sarah Porter as regular members of the Design Review Committee. The appointments are for 3-year terms to run through March 2024. Also, to reappoint Mr. Charlie Adams as a regular member to the Design Review Committee. His appointment is for a 2-year term to run through March 2023.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, roll call vote, Dan Horgan,
Aye.
Tracy Post,
Aye.
Mike Stone,
Aye.
Eric Tolley,
Aye.
chair votes aye. It carries. Next one, please.
Chairman, I make a recommendation to reappoint Lee Rowley, Mr. Tom Roach, and Mr. John DeLiso as regular members to the Water Resource Advisory Committee. These appointments are for a 1-year term.
Very good. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second? Any
Second.
discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, roll call vote, Dan Horgan,
Aye.
Tracy Post,
Aye.
Mike Stone,
Aye.
Eric Tolley,
Aye.
chair votes aye, carries. I think that concludes your report. Is that correct, Mr. Horgan?
It does. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Very good, thank you. The next item is the approval of the minutes for the February 23rd, 2021 public session prior to the executive session. Does anybody have any changes or modifications to make to those
February
minutes?
23rd. In the packet, the first one on our thing is February 16th. That typo?
Yeah, well, on the agenda, it's February 23rd. Bob, do you want to give us a hand here?
I would say, I just want to make sure, because the executive session is the 16th also, so the date doesn't look like it's correct on that.
Okay.
For the 23rd. I know I've done them, but I don't see them in the packet. So you should not vote for the 23rd. We can hold both the 16th since it does not, it isn't on the agenda.
Okay.
You can hold it if we're going to meet next week, so we can just hold it.
Great. Do we have any corrections or changes to the minutes of November 17th, 2020? Any board members want to propose?
I'll make a motion to approve as submitted.
Do I have a second? Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, roll call vote. Dan Horgan,
Aye.
Tracy Post,
Aye.
Mike Stone,
Aye.
Eric Tolley,
Aye.
chair votes aye. So the next item on the minutes is March 24th, 2020. Does any board member have a modification or a change, edit for these minutes? Okay, hearing no recommendations or suggestions to change or edit, I'll take a motion.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, roll call vote. Dan Horgan,
I need to abstain, Mr. Chairman.
okay. Tracy Post,
Aye.
Mike Stone,
Aye.
Eric Tolley,
Aye.
chair votes aye. Just so that I'm clear, Bob, that's it. We've got the approval of the executive session minutes of the 23rd. Do we hold off on those as well? You have to unmute yourself, Bob.
We only have minutes for the 16th executive session.
Right. I think, as I said, those are not on the agenda, so I think I'd
Right.
prefer to hold those till next week. I have read, there were 22 sets of minutes that had not been approved by you, so I've read those. I only have one set of questions from something in 2018, so I'll be bringing all of those in for you to hopefully review, approve, and I believe release. And that should clean up the backlog of executive session minutes. That's my hope, to get that done.
That's great, Bob.
You'll see that in another week or two.
So now we know where you've been for the past week or so.
I've been able to sleep very well after reading those.
Thank you.
Those are quite interesting.
Okay,
But I wanted to get those done before Mr. Rittenhour came.
very much appreciated. The next item on the board and committee actions is upcoming agenda review. Is there anything in terms of agenda items that you would like to make reference to, Bob?
The only thing, Mr. Chairman, you did ask that on the 16th that we put in the proclamation for Women's History Month, which will be done. On the 23rd, we will not be having the capital budget hearing and finance committee budget hearing. Those are required by charter, but we will most likely have those, my guess is the 13th of April. We did, and you may be discussing this later under individual items, but the school committee did take a vote on their maximum budget, which is causing some heartburn, shall we say. But we won't, the date on the 23rd was because we thought we might be having the town meeting on the 27th of April. Since that's not going to happen, we will move it to a better date so the finance committee can finish their reviews and make their final recommendations.
Okay.
Other than that, those are the items that that I had for changes, and we will adjust the projected agenda items to reflect that.
Okay. So for the 16th, we're looking at obviously the COVID update. We're looking at a drive-in site use discussion.
Yes.
And obviously a beach operations update. Do we have any other budget items that we have to slide in there, do you think? Are we we're almost done, aren't we?
I think you're almost done. I think what I've tried to do is to have people come in who are exceptions. If the budgets are basically the same, such as the community development, there was no need for them to come in and discuss unless you'd like them to, but their budgets are static. And there was an IT budget on, but we're hopeful, we're interviewing tomorrow for IT director. There's no one really to present the budget. So I took that off. I do see on March 30th, we tentatively have the finance division. They do have changes, so I think they should come in. And then, of course, we'll have the DHY update, I'm hopeful, on March 30th. I think on the 16th, those two items will be somewhat significant.
Right.
I had drafted a memo to the board listing some decision items that I think you should consider and need to give us some direction on the reuse if you want to do one. That hasn't been reviewed internally, and also the drive-in committee is reviewing what I had done, so that you'll have some review before you get it. We won't have to send it to another committee. You'll see the results of that. And then on the beach operation, this is as a result of last year when there were numerous issues at Grays Beach and at Dennis Pond. So the subcommittee started by the recreation director and also with Pat Armstrong have been working on some options that for your review, you don't have to do them, but there are suggestions on how we might better control the traffic in the area and the usage, especially since it increased so much last year. So those will be in your packet early. I've asked them to be delivered by Thursday morning so we could get them to you by Friday for your packet for Tuesday.
Any board members have any comments about the agenda for the 16th or the 23rd? Is there?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
If I may, does the beach operation update include a discussion on Bass Hole?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, it's Bass Hole and Dennis Pond. Yes, sir.
Sorry if I missed that. I only heard
No,
that.
those are the two options. That's the focus of the report from the internal committee. Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Great. Anybody else? Does anybody have any comments on any upcoming agenda items?
Just that I won't be here on April 20th.
You will not be here.
For which meeting?
April
20th of April.
April 13th. Okay.
20th.
20th.
Oh, 20th. Sorry.
That's okay.
Well, it seems like a late agenda at the moment. But...
Mr. Chairman, I may be alone in this, but I'm wondering if it makes sense when we have the drive-in discussion, if we couldn't have a brief presentation on the park that is planned there, so that we're considering things in context of what's already in play.
There's nothing, if I understand the question, there is nothing going on at the drive-in now because you have awarded no licenses. Is that what you meant, Mr. Hagan? No.
And this may be my misperception, but on the CPC funding, aren't we talking about the boardwalk? Is that off of the drive-in site or is that further up?
No, it's off of the drive-in site, but it does not my understanding is it does not impact any entertainment usage that you would approve or not approve. It's a separate area along Parkers River.
Along the Parkers River, okay. And there's, I guess my concern is that whatever use we consider is appropriate for what we've already planned and are hoping to build in that area. There's a nice map here of it now.
Oh, okay.
Maybe I'm the only one that needs to look at that a little more carefully, but I certainly, if we consider any kind of a license use, I'd want to make sure that it's conducive to the design that's been laid out and approved at this point.
Yes, it will be.
Okay.
But that'll be part of the presentation. I'll make sure that that's highlighted by the presenters next week.
Okay, great.
Is that helpful? Okay, any more business on the upcoming agenda item? Okay, hearing none, let's move on to the next one, which is individual items. Oh, and the discussion of the middle school feasibility study payment. And I know, Dan Horgan, you wanted to bring that up and talk about it. Others did obviously as well. So I'm going to ask you, Dan, to.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd ask for indulgence because it may take a couple of minutes for me to try to clarify. For us, a question that's been asked of this board several times now in public comment. as you know, a member of the public has been asking for this information since back in January, really, and making certain representations that, to my mind at least, are inaccurate and that are potentially catastrophic to our tax rates moving forward into the future. This particular individual comes to the microphone at almost every meeting. And to be candid, I'm not really sure why she does it. But she does it in such a way as to almost always be negative, whether it's about our staff, our volunteers, or the way as we, as a board, try to serve the townspeople of our community. Now, I do want to apologize right up front to this particular person because it's taken us way too long to respond to her assertions and her questions. It never should have taken this long, and that's our fault. And I apologize for that. But one of the representations that's being made repeatedly is that our neighboring town, Dennis, has failed to fully reimburse their share for a feasibility study that was done for the proposed new middle school. The assertion that Dennis shortchanged us on that study is just wrong. It's mistaken. Dennis made that agreement back when the formula for the two towns was different than it is currently. Their share back then was 31% rather than the current 35%. So that's the first misrepresentation, Mr. Chairman, that continues to be made at public comment. Now, it's important to note that what we're really talking about here is a difference of approximately $14,000 plus or minus, $14,000. So let's try to put that amount into a proper context if we can. We have a school budget annually of 60 million plus that we share with the town of Dennis every year. 60 million plus every year. So $14,000 in a $60 million budget is 0.02%. That's what we're arguing about. That's what's being brought up constantly. 0.02%. Secondly, the towns of Yarmouth and Dennis have, since that time, agreed to a new school formula after a lot of hard work by a lot of good people. And that new formula is going to benefit Yarmouth significantly in the years to come. That formula calls for a 35-65% split. And that's the percentage split that the speaker continues to drone on. Frankly, I think all of us were hopeful that we had finally turned a corner with our sister town of Dennis. We were hopeful that we could now try and improve the relationship between the two towns and improve the quality and the outlook of our public school for our kids and our families. Most of us are tired of the conflict. The second and more troubling of the misrepresentations that have been put forward is that Dennis cannot be trusted in small matters, like this $14,000 differential. So maybe Yarmouth should rethink our intention of forming a partnership with them in our planning for wastewater. Now remember, we're talking about 0.02% of 1 year's school budget. That's the rationale that's being put forward for that assertion. The most dangerous misrepresentation that's being put forward is that it will only cost Yarmouth about $4 or $5 million to go it alone on this wastewater plant. And this is where, for me at least, crazy has to be called out for what it is. Crazy. Because that suggestion is dangerous. It's dangerous and it's wrong. Anyone who doesn't have their head in the sand by now should understand that a partnership with Dennis and wastewater, and hopefully with Harwich also, will save our taxpayers in the following way. We have the opportunity to save up to $5 million in costs in constructing the treatment plant just by itself. And the treatment plant is in Dennis, not on Buck Island Road. Now remember, $14,000 versus that $5 million. Further, Yarmouth in this partnership hopes to save between $3 and $4 million every year. Every year in operating and maintenance costs for the treatment facility. Start multiplying that in your head or get out your calculators, but compare that figure as against $14,000. Finally, we also hope to qualify for zero interest loans because partnerships with other towns are favored in these kinds of borrowings. And we've been told that we could expect anywhere from $20 to $40 million in additional savings over the course of the project. $14,000 versus $20 million. So because of a disagreement or a misunderstanding over $14,000, give or take 0.02% of just 1 year's school budget, this particular citizen suggests that Yarmouth should go it alone and lose tens of millions of dollars in savings for our taxpayers. As I said before, sometimes it's just necessary to call crazy out for what it is. That's crazy. This particular citizen comes to the microphone almost every week, and that's her right. But the staff and the volunteers of this town work really hard to make this town better and to help keep it affordable for our residents to live in. And these continued criticisms and half-truths and out misrepresentations are just not helpful. And so I'd invite this particular citizen and those that are like her to join the rest of us. Roll up their sleeves and get into the arena with us. And stop criticizing everything that we do from the sidelines. Because taking shots from the sidelines misleads people. And frankly, it's deflating to all of us who are trying to do the work. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. On this particular topic, is there any other comment?
I have a comment.
Sure, Eric.
I want my 14,000 bucks. This is a matter of principle. I don't care what the dollar amount is. I don't care what the percentage is. We had an agreement and they have not lived up to their end of the agreement. Simple as that.
Eric, I don't know, did you see the commentary by town council indicating that the 65-35 split didn't apply unless there was some separate provision?
I did see that, but what I'm looking at right now are the numbers that were presented to us in the packet.
Mm-hmm.
What they agreed to pay when they signed on and what the finance committee convinced the voters on their October 3rd town meeting to pay are not the same. It's that simple. You don't just get to make an agreement and then decide you're going to deduct your legal costs. That's like hiring somebody to mow your lawn and not paying them because they missed a blade of grass.
Well, I think on the legal costs, I think that was taken care of by the voters in Dennis. I think they actually they dispensed with that and didn't allow those costs to be deducted.
So what was their final? So what was this presentation about the differential of $14,000?
The question that, as I understand it, is that there's been an allegation made by a constituent that the split on the feasibility study should be 65-35. And I think what council's telling us is that that was the split as agreed to in the agreement dated November 4th, 2019. These were costs that were incurred well before the change in the formula. So I actually asked the school department if they would agree with town council's assessment, and they essentially indicated that they did as well.
Of course they did.
Well, it's town council. It's our town council.
Well, yeah, but you're asking the school administration to agree with town council. Of course they're going to. So my question is, Yarmouth Finance Office bills Dennis for $138,000 and change on March 22nd of 20. October 3rd of 20, Dennis voters approve $123,000 and change. What are we entitled to and what did we get? Simple question.
Well, that's where the difference of opinion goes, Eric.
Right.
They believe that they made the agreement to reimburse under the old agreement, and we believe that they made the agreement under the new agreement. And I don't read town council's email the same way you do, Mark. First of all. Second of all, it is the principal. And no, I don't believe that it should impact other issues. It is a small amount of money. I agree with you, Dan, but at the same time, you know, if you get a bill for $138,000, do you just write a check to that person without having a discussion as to why? I mean, if that was their agreement, how about having a little communication with us? I'm sorry, well, we disagree with your interpretation. Do you think Dan Knappich got an opinion prior to sending the bill for $138,000, or you think he just made that up?
Is that a rhetorical question?
No, it's a legitimate question. I would think that he had some legal basis to send that bill.
Well, if you read town council's opinion,
I read it.
That said that to his knowledge, there was no side agreement, their agreement. So again, if you read the agreement and you read the legal terms, Dennis paid what they thought was a fair number and that the town was asking for too much.
Okay.
The chairman, can I be heard?
Sure.
In the first place, Dan, I respectfully think you're mixing up a lot of different issues here. And I think that one can have the opinion that Dennis didn't pay their fair share of the feasibility study and yet still agree to go along with the regional approach to wastewater. Among other reasons, you're not going to be locked into a pre-existing agreement like you were with the school agreement. You're in the you're participating in the formulation of the agreement going forward. Secondly, regardless of the opinions of any person, we got to all remember that this is the people's government. This is town government. And if people want to come and voice their opinions, even if we think they're extreme or we don't agree with them, they have that right. And we're not doing them any favors. And so, you know, I'm not bothered by anybody that comes. I don't often agree with different individuals that come before us. And I do think that some of the opinions are extreme or irrational, but we all come from different backgrounds. We all have different education, training, experiences that make us different. And we have to understand that. But let me get to the point. When I was on the negotiating committee, and the other person that was on the negotiating committee was Norm Holcomb when we were going through this. And Norman frequently brought up the issue of, what about the feasibility study? How much are you going to pay for the feasibility study? They never locked in a percentage or a number. They said, and here's what they said exactly, and you can check with Norm Holcomb about this. They said, if the school goes through, we'll pay our fair share. So they didn't agree to sit down at the table and pay their share based on the school population at that time. That is total mythology. That never happened. In fact, they didn't agree to pay that separate and apart from the ultimate result of having a combined school. They said, if we can work this out, and the school gets built as a joint enterprise, so to speak, we'll pay our fair share. So the only other agreement that was reached at the end of this resolution was a 65-35 split. So naturally, the assumption was that'll cover everything. But I don't know, Dan, where you got your information that there was an agreement that they would pay based on the school population that has existed at the time of the feasibility study, because they never said that, ever. And I was at every single one of those meetings. It never happened.
Yeah, well,
I
that's
don't
the
know.
language that, but
And I
like,
don't know what town council would know about that, because he wasn't there either.
yeah, but Mike, that's the language that's in the regional agreement. Yeah, but Mike, that's the language that's in the regional agreement. That's the formula they used, the language that was specified in the regional agreement. The way the agreement reads is the 65-35 split doesn't apply to costs before the date of that agreement.
Right.
Unless
I don't,
council
but I
suggesting
think
the
that
side
agreement was contemplating operational costs, not a special project like this that Yarmouth funded. The Yarmouth taxpayers funded this in its entirety, and then Dennis kind of invited themselves into this project.
All I'm saying
That's
is
what happened. So you know, I agree with Tracy and Eric. I think, and then it didn't pass. The voters didn't pass the part about the legal fees, but where does it say in the agreement that they could even entertain deducting their legal fees? Where does it say that, Mark, in the regional agreement?
It doesn't. That's the reason why it got shut down.
But they didn't put our number on their warrant. They put the number they believed.
Right, they put the number that was outlined in the regional agreement and as confirmed by town council. So that's what they should have done.
What it, you know what, it is a moot point. It's not worth talking about, but it goes in the back of my mind because honestly, it is 14,000. It is the principal. And the biggest problem we have is the lack of communication. Like I said, if we received a bill from them that was in difference from what we agreed, wouldn't you have a conversation with them instead of just ignoring
I
it?
have no idea who talked to Ed or who went back and forth in the finance office. All I'm saying is that we asked town council, what's the formula that should apply? He put the same one in that was reflected in the billing. So it's a legal question. If we wanted a different split, that should have been part of the negotiation for that 2019 agreement, but it wasn't. So
It wasn't. It was.
for us, I honestly believe it's a huge mistake for us to be beating up on the town of Dennis when there's no reason to do so. And it doesn't help us in terms of our relations going forward. I agree completely with the sentiments echoed by Dan Horgan. I really do. It's a fairly simple call as far as I'm concerned. Very easy, very simple, very easy to read. So
Not in my opinion. And we were there for.
we obviously disagree.
Yeah.
It's a very straight, I mean, if town council came up back with a different opinion, I'd certainly understand, but it's a pretty straight call. So
Mark, are you telling us that you've always agreed and abided by the advice of town council? Is that what you're telling everybody?
I'm saying that it's appropriate for him to weigh in on this question, and it would have been helpful if he weighed in or maybe was asked earlier on when it came in.
He has no idea
I
what happened.
look at the regional agreement. The town of Dennis used the regional agreement as a way to interpret how to allocate the costs. It's pretty straightforward. And you can't basically take something that was paid for in 2017 and 2018 and retroactively apply the other formula. You just can't do it. The agreement basically says costs incurred on or before the date. In this case,
Cost wasn't part of the cost wasn't part of the operating budget of the Dennis Yarmouth Regional School System. The figure that we're talking about was solely the action of the voters of the town of Yarmouth to appropriate, I think it was something like 750,000 for a feasibility study.
No,
Well, they should have signed the feasibility study under the old agreement, but they didn't. They signed it when the new agreement was in place.
Well, if they did under again, you're still talking about a number that's roughly the same as what they paid. So if it was under the old agreement, then the same that we're back in the same spot. You're asking them to pay more than what they should pay.
I disagree.
I hear you. I hear you, but I agree completely with Dan Horgan. My analysis comes up the same way as his. And I think if someone wants to, understand why they paid what they did, it's very clear based on what town council said and by looking at the facts. So right, I'm gonna move on to the next item on the agenda.
You just don't want to hear it.
I've heard plenty. What else is there to say?
Well, you keep moving on from it like it's a fait accompli. Like, because you don't
like
agree
a red
with it.
herring. It's like beating a red herring. I think what's the next item to talk? What else do you want to pursue on this?
I want to make it right.
It's been right. We disagree as a board.
No,
The majority of the
you
board.
disagree with the majority of the board,
Right,
Mark.
exactly.
You disagree
Then,
with
then,
the
then put
majority.
something
You're
on the
not an
table.
emperor. You're only a chairman.
I understand. Put it, then.
I'd like to find out what advice Dan had at the time to send that bill. I know you talked to him. We're not privy to that information, so it'd be interesting to find out, because I don't think he would have just picked that number. And then I'd like to know what our recourse is.
Is that the sentiment of the board? Mike,
Yes.
Eric?
Yes.
Okay.
No.
Well, you want to vote on, we have to
I think
vote on
you're
just
putting-
about everything. So that's, Tracy's made the motion. And
Second it.
it's seconded. All those in favor, roll call vote. Dan Horgan,
Nay.
Mike Stone,
Aye.
Eric Tolley,
Aye.
Tracy Post,
Aye.
chair votes nay. Okay, there you go. Next item, town administrator items. You have a consent agenda that you'd like?
We
us-
have the consent agenda. It may seem strange, but my appointment is on again because there's a legal matter, at least Mary Wagon tells me that you have to put it on the consent agenda so that we can then go to the registry of deeds and register my name again as part of the trust.
I move
And
the
then-
consent agenda.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, motion and second. Any discussion? Hearing none, roll call vote. Dan Horgan,
Aye.
Mike Stone,
Aye.
Eric Tolley,
Aye.
Tracy Post,
Aye.
chair votes aye.
And the only other items that I would have, just a notice that next week there'll be a resolution of local governing body authorizing submission and execution of the town of Yarmouth annual action plan for CDBG money. Pretty standard, but that'll be on the agenda. And then there is a hearing on, I guess it's this week, March 11th at 4 p.m. to obtain comments on the Community Development Block Grant one-year action plan. So
Very
if you're
good.
interested, there is a Zoom link that Mary could send if you wish.
All
And
right,
that's it for me, anyway. Thank you.
great. So the next item is adjourn. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Okay, we got a second and a motion. All right. Any discussion? All those in favor, roll call vote. Dan Horgan,
Aye.
Mike Stone,
Aye.
Eric Tolley,
Aye.
Tracy Post,
Aye.
chair votes aye. All right, thank you, everybody. Have
Thank
a
you.
great night.
Good
Take care.
night.